What terrible decisions did you make while you were mad, and how did it play out? Telling a judge, "Whatever, screw this court and the city of Richmond." The consequences? 30 days in jail for a contempt of court charge. I regretted that one. I punched a cop in the nose and broke it. It was instinctual after having a frickin' horrible day coupled with some creepy mother effer following me around for 4 blocks. I thought it was the creeper, not the cop, that I hit, when I felt a heavy hand on my shoulder. The cop was freaking out on the ground and his partner pulled his weapon on me, yelling to put my hands up. I had to explain why that mistake happened. It worked out okay, but I had to go to the police station to explain my story. Found out the cop was about to ask me if I'd noticed that my wallet was about to fall out of my pocket. It all ends with the broken-nosed cop saying it was okay and that I'd be let go if I bought him the burgers he was on his way to get. His grin was comedy gold. Ended up buying the burgers for the whole department. That was expensive. Yeah, I was really lucky. This happened when I was 18 and I'm 21 now. If it helps, white as can be. For a broke college student, over $250 for burgers was a bit steep. I'm just happy it all ended on a positive note. My parents don't know and probably never will. Thank God, or whatever other deity. Let's go with Odin. Praise be to Odin. When I was 19, I worked at a summer camp as a sort of supervisor for a group of counselors. There was an event coming up and I'd wanted to take the day off in order to attend. My boss insisted that it wasn't possible for me to take the day off, so I decided to call in sick because it teed me off. Now, knowing that I'd need a note from my physician, I actually went to the doctor the following day. My normal doctor wasn't in, and a nurse practitioner was filling in. She did a pretty thorough exam, poking and prodding my stomach and asking me if it hurt. I probably reacted in a couple of areas, trying to really sell my illness. At this point, she recommends that I visit the ER because she believes I might have appendicitis. This means a better doctor's note, right? So, I'm in the ER, my entire family is there at this point, and they're having me drink the barium milkshakes to prepare for imaging to see if I need to have an appendectomy. I have to drink 4 of these things over an hour, and I'm on my last one, and the ER doc comes in and tells me he's going to have the surgeon come in to chat. Knowing that they're going to take these pictures and that everything will be fine, I'm not concerned. Well, the surgeon comes in after I've finished that last drink, and he says that he can see I'm in some pain. I guess I'm still selling it. To which I explain that we're going to take the pictures to see if it's legit. I know these will turn up negative. He then answers that he doesn't need the pictures and we should just go to surgery now. 10 years on, I'm appendix-free, and to this day I still haven't told my family. In short, I faked being sick to get back at my boss, and now I don't have an appendix. Well, here's hoping that they don't work out that the appendix really is used for space travel or to harness midichlorians or something really important in the near future. Otherwise, you blew your chance to live in the Star Wars to get your boss off your back for one day. Got into a drunken fight with my wife, drove off angrily, crashed into a tree, spent a long time in intensive care, almost died, face permanently disfigured. My older sister was teasing me mercilessly when I was about 8 years old. I was stewing over it for about an hour and decided that the best revenge would be to destroy her favorite blanket that our mother had made by hand. One for her, one for me, cut from the same cloth. I grabbed her blanket and a pair of scissors and proceeded to cut the blankie to ribbons in front of her. She started laughing hysterically, which was not the reaction I'd expected. I looked at what was left of the blanket, saw my initials on it, and realized that I'd mistakenly destroyed my favorite blankie. In a heated argument with my mum, I shouted, "Suck my eggplant." I instantly regretted that. Not about myself, but my dad. He used to have a serious drinking problem, and one night when I was in high school, I was driving home from work and the town I lived in was very small. I ended up driving behind a truck that I was pretty certain was my dad's. Now, I should add that I was driving with my brights on because one of my headlights was messed up and it wouldn't turn on without having the brights on. Well, I'm driving home thinking how funny it is that I ended up behind my dad when he slows down and comes to a complete stop at a curve where I couldn't get around him. I was very confused. He gets out of his car and starts screaming at me from his car. He's calling me all sorts of names and grabs a Frosty from Wendy's and throws it at my car. He ended up throwing it so hard that it dented the middle of my hood. I was absolutely terrified. He had gotten mad like this before, but I seriously had no idea what I'd done to tee him off so bad. He starts walking towards my car, and even though he was a good distance away, I could see the look of rage in his eyes. I was physically shaken. So much so that I couldn't even manage to cry because I was so terrified. Turns out my dad had gotten into an argument with a guy in the Wendy's parking lot who had a similar car to me, and since I had my brights on, he couldn't tell it was me, not to mention he was probably driving drunk. When he got to my door, I assume he was planning on grabbing the guy out, my dad just stopped frozen. He got back in his truck and drove away. When I got home, he walked into his room, grabbed a bag, and left to stay in a hotel and start getting help. He couldn't look me or my mother in the eye. I was playing chess with my mum. I was in my elementary school's chess club at the time, so I thought I was pretty hot stuff. I was 10, however, and she was an adult, so she was beating me without effort. I was a little jerk, so it didn't take long for me to reach my 10-year-old boiling point. In a fit of misplaced child rage, I picked up one of her knights and I bit it. It was a cheap plastic set, so I managed to take a chip out of it. The knight remains chipped, and to this day, whenever I get upset about something, my mum just says, "Don't bite the pony." When I was around 9 years old, my sister was always a bit of a bully to me. At the time, she had a broken leg and was using crutches to get around. While walking down the stairs, she hit me with one of her crutches. Apparently at the time I'd had enough of her crap, so I turned and kicked both of her crutches out. Halfway down the stairs, she fell about 9 stairs down and probably had to keep the cast on her leg for another few months because of that. For clarification, my sister was and still is a bit of a jerk. I was probably around 12, my older sister had a friend over and was being really mean to me. She was in her room with the door shut, so I took some string and tied her doorknob to mine across the hall so she couldn't open hers. Of course, right after I did that, she knocked a bottle of nail polish remover onto a candle and lit her carpet on fire. And that is how I lost my… I'm joking. Yes, I cut the string and no, they weren't hurt. Her friend actually told her to stop being so mean to me. But the next time I'm 12 and upset, I'll remember that teenagers aren't very responsible with fire. I really thought that was going in a different direction. Wow. Not me, but my brother. I hope the entertaining story makes that okay as a submission. So my brother is a rageaholic, especially when playing Xbox first-person shooters. He has thrown and destroyed about 5 or 6 Xbox 360 controllers. These things range from $50 to $60 each. He doesn't buy knockoff brands either. One night, during a peak of extreme intensity, he was moments away from smashing yet another controller. Hand raised in the air, ready to be smashed to the ground as hard as possible. Suddenly, a brief lucid moment crossed his mind. Perhaps I shouldn't do this. It's going to cost me another $60 if I break this controller. But rage overflowing and hand already in the air, all he could alter about the decision in that split second was to smash the controller down onto the couch instead of the floor. Well, it just so happened that he had placed his brand new iPhone on the couch earlier before starting his gaming session and completely forgotten it was there until the moment the remote made a shattering contact with it. This, of course, triggered some sort of super rage. "I tried not to break my controller. How could fate do this to me?" I believe is a semi-accurate paraphrasing of his thought train. With Super Rage mode activated, the obvious logical course of action was to kick the 50-inch projection television as hard as he could. He put his foot right through the screen, decided to get blackout drunk, and woke up to a destroyed living room with a shattered iPhone and destroyed TV filled with vomit. He vaguely remembers laughing as he threw up into the hole in the TV. The Xbox remote was fine though, since you're asking. I should add, he was around 30 years old when this happened. We're roommates. That man has problems and should probably be in an anger management class of some sort. Although just for this one story, I'm somewhat glad he isn't because that's funny as all heck. Throwing my phone because I was arguing with the Lenovo customer support about the warranty on my broken laptop. The phone hit the TV, which cracked the screen on both the phone and TV. Now I'm using Internet Explorer on a library computer, and I regret everything. I can totally see that happening because phones are just so perfect for throwing in anger. I can't even remember all the times I got upset after a conversation and then just threw the phone on the table, until one day it bounced back and cracked the mirror. I was eating some tuna after having a bad day. My younger brother kept teasing me for something I don't remember now and wouldn't shut up after I told him to several times. All of a sudden, I grabbed my fork and launched it at him. The fork hits him in the head, and 5 seconds later, blood starts coming out of his head with increasing intensity. The consequences? A lesson. If you're having a really bad day, don't take it out on others. Especially your family, which is the only group of guys that really give a crap about you. Also, there was a life scar on his forehead. My first boyfriend threw a bean at his cousin at his 8th birthday party. She retaliated by throwing a fork into his eye. He had to have his lens removed and his pupil expanded to fill his entire iris. Despite being partially blind in that eye, he had a great sense of humor about it. He was able to finally get surgery to fix it when he was 18. Eye surgery seemed even more traumatic than the original injury. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Punching a huge dent in the side of the refrigerator. I am not a smart man. My younger brother was troubled in his teens, to say the least. He had a lot of anger issues. I've never been a fighter, however he and my older brother were totally different. They saw violence as the only answer to disagreements. Anyway, one night I'm in my house with my friends and I get a call from my mum. My younger brother and his friend were at her house tormenting her. They were both completely drunk. I made my way there. She only stays a couple of streets away. In the time it took me to get there, she had called the police after my brother had hit her and thrown her down the stairs. She had managed to get him out of the house, but he and his friends were trying to break the door down to get back in. My brother had quite the reputation with the local police, and so they sent as many resources as they could. 5 police cars and a police dog unit. My mum's street was lit up in blue and red flashing lights by the time I got there. My brother and his friend had run into the large car park behind my mum's house when they heard the sirens of the police. So the dog unit was out trying to find them while I comforted my mother. They eventually were found hiding in a bush and were dragged back to a police car in cuffs. This was a Friday night. My brother was supposed to be working all weekend, but I knew if they took him away, he'd be locked up until Monday at the earliest. I spoke to the policeman in charge and convinced him that I could control my brother when he was drunk. That was a lie. I pleaded with them to let him come stay at my house rather than lock him up. My mum tearfully agreed and they let me walk away with him. The policeman, however, gave me his mobile number and told me to phone him directly if there was any more trouble with my brother, as he'd be patrolling the area most of the night anyway. My brother and I walked away, and to begin with, there were no problems. Then, as we get closer to mine, the drunken slurs start and he tells me he hates me, this is all my fault, he's ashamed to be my brother because I'm gay, yada yada yada. So I decide I don't want him to come to mine, and I reach into my pocket to get my phone so that I could phone that policeman and just have him taken away. At that precise moment, I look up and my brother has swung a punch in my direction. I dodged it and clocked him in the side of the head with the phone, smashing it. He almost lost balance and then definitely did when I punched him again. I completely lost it. All the rage at what he'd done to my mum, for what he'd said to me, for the way he acted, it all came out. I was kicking him repeatedly. I was wearing Timberland boots, and I was punching him over and over. It wasn't until I'd sat on him, pinning him to the ground and punched him one final time that I realized what I'd done. I watched as his head flopped back, his eyes rolled back, and a pool of blood appeared under his head. I was certain that I'd killed him. I couldn't phone for help because I'd smashed my phone. I couldn't shout for help as it's 2 a.m. and there's nobody around. Right then, I make the single scariest decision I've ever made. I put my coat under his head and I leave him there in the pouring rain. I run back to my house faster than any human has probably ever moved. I get to mine, burst in the door and shout at my friend to call an ambulance and tell them where my brother is then take off running back to him. Luckily, he's still laying there, out cold but breathing, thank God. One of my friends arrives a minute or so later. We keep him warm until the ambulance arrives. The policeman also arrived at the same time. He said it was likely my brother wouldn't remember what was happened, he was that drunk, and that he wouldn't put this in the final report. I get in the ambulance with him to the hospital and then sat there for the next 8 hours waiting for him to regain consciousness. When he was able to have a visitor in the room, I walked through ready to apologize. And what happened next blew me away. He broke down in tears immediately, apologizing for always being such an insufferable butthole, begging me to forgive him. And that was the end of my brother's troubled teen years. He ended up with a broken nose, half an ear missing from scraping against the ground as I kicked him, a fractured cheekbone and a hairline fracture in his skull. He couldn't go to work for a month, which was made even more torturous for him because my mum, understandably, refused to talk to him or do anything for him. They didn't speak for about 18 months until he gave her her first grandchild. That brought the whole family together and completely changed him. Now our family are stronger than ever. We might have come out the other side stronger, but that feeling where I thought I'd killed my younger brother, that feeling will always make that angry decision the worst decision I've ever made. In short, my brother beat up my mum, so I beat him within an inch of his life. Yep, well, there's some understandably complex feelings going on here. We don't know for sure if your brother's turnaround would have come anytime soon. It's possible, but I think we should just leave this as a just be thankful it turned out the way it did and not with him dead moment. This could have very easily been terrible. When I was 14, my dad forgot to pick me up after school, and he told me to find my own way home. I walked approximately 8.5 miles to get to my house. Then he wouldn't let me in. I was so angry I went to my neighbor's house. It was a kid in the same grade as me who lived there, Mike, and when I told him what had happened, he said I could come in. He had an older brother who smoked cigarettes and green herb. I had never smoked or drunk before, but I was mad, really mad. We stole all of his stuff, got high, and smoked all night in Mike's bedroom. The consequences? 11 years later, still smoke cigarettes and dealing with cancer. Worst decision ever. All because I was angry with my crappy dad. I was a little kid, around 8 years old, and I'd gotten in a fight with my sister. I got really mad and threw one of those mini CDs at her in rage. It was a GameCube game, I think. It curved perfectly through the air and hit her right between the eyes. I'm laughing about it now, but she had a scar for a while. When my sister and I were much younger, we fell out and argued for probably the first time. She was just old enough to be trusted to walk around the house on her own and stuff, and I'm about 5 years older than her. We fell out, I can't remember what over, but shortly after she came back into the room we'd been in. She was in tears and holding a piece of paper. It was a picture of me and her holding hands and the words, "I'm sorry." I ripped it up in front of her eyes, threw it to the ground and left the room. I'm sure she doesn't remember this, but it still gets to me to this day. We get on as well as two siblings possibly could nowadays. I reckon if I asked her, she wouldn't have a clue, but I'll never forget looking at her as she welled up right in front of me. Okay, update. I've just been to my sister's room and asked if she remembered. She didn't. I told her how it plagues me every day, and she laughed it off. She's cool like that. It's made me feel a lot better by getting the closure, and by the sounds of things, many of you guys also seek this kind of closure. I've been reading down here, and there's a lot of you with much worse things plaguing your minds. Seriously, you should talk to the people you've wronged if you can. Get the closure. It's comforting. After a series of frustrating events, screw it. Today is a good day to try a cigarette. I'm still trying to quit 9 years later. I got angry at someone who was born and proceeded to treat them like crap for almost 8 years. I was 8 or something when my cousin was brought into the world. When he got older, he was always over here. I don't know why I hated my little cousin so much. He was a great kid. I just had this rage. It would manifest in doing tiny little things to hurt him. Maybe trip him, or just destroying him repeatedly in video games or things like that. I used to glare at him a lot when he wasn't looking. When he was about 8 and I was about 16, I had to watch him for a little bit, and he wanted to go outside and play with this stupid little golf set. But all I wanted to do was stay in the house and play video games. He dragged me out and gave me a turn, and I accidentally hit him on the head when I went to swing. And by accidentally, I mean completely on purpose, but looked like it was an accident. So I hit him. He broke down crying and had a small gash on his head. I took him into the house and cleaned his cut and was indifferent to his crying, just coldly saying it was an accident. Then he replies through the tears, "It's okay, I know you wouldn't hurt me on purpose." That's when it hit me. Almost like I hit him. That's when I realized what a freaking crappy human being I'd been. I treated him like he was freaking trash. What the hell was I doing? Why the F was I so angry? After that, all of my meanness towards him just kind of went away. I'd say that we're pretty much best friends since then. I didn't say goodbye to my mum the last time I ever saw her. I wished in my head that she'd die. Only because I was angry, she and my brother were going to Fiji without me, and I was stuck with having to go to work. But I didn't realize it was because her radiation therapy hadn't worked, and she was pretty much going home to die. I had no idea it had progressed to that stage, so when she came to hug me, I turned away, so she gave me a side hug. Well, that was the best she could do, and she was pretty weak at that stage. I still feel like the worst person alive thinking about her face that morning and her tiny little bony frame pressed up against mine. I guess my mum didn't tell me herself, probably because she was a super positive kind of person. In the last couple of months before she passed, she was still telling me her plans about what she was going to be doing. In her words, when I get better. She had plans for where she was going to go forward with her career. She had a psychology degree, but worked with disabled people in a respite center. It didn't seem like she could die to me, really. That added to my shock, I guess. Years ago, I was really angry at my roommate because she couldn't keep a secret, so I punched a framed picture of her that was on the wall. The glass cut into every one of my knuckles. The worst was my thumb. The blood took forever to stop, and I just bandaged it really tight. After about 3 days, I started to notice red streaks running up my arm. I showed my dad, and he took me to the hospital. Turns out I cut my tendon, and the joint had gotten severely infected. The doctor said I was hours away from losing my thumb. After surgery, I had to stay in the hospital for 5 days with an IV hooked up. The morphine was nice, though. When I was a kid, my little sister did something to enrage me. She's standing in front of one of the walls, and I decided to wind up and launch the biggest haymaker a 6-year-old can muster. It was a glorious swing that ended up impacting the wall as she matrixed out of the way. I ended up running to my mum, screaming and bawling that my sister was mean, so I tried to punch her, but she moved, causing me to injure myself. My mum laughed at me and walked away. What cliché, outdated advice is complete bullcrap these days? Only use the internet after 6 because it's free then. I got this advice in the mid-2000s, and with the phone company would only use the internet after 6 p.m., so it's bizarre to think that that was ever a thing. You should learn how to use the card catalog at your local library. If you'd like to make a call, please hang up and try again. If you need help, dial your operator. My grandma told me that to find where a restaurant was, you looked up their phone number in the yellow pages, called them, and asked for directions. As someone who worked as a restaurant hostess before, the amount of people that actually asked for directions was honestly astonishing. There were also a lot of people that asked for the address. My grandma was advised to drink Guinness when pregnant because it was iron-rich and she was a little anemic. She got the same way in her last year of life and took great pleasure in reminding us all that she needed her medicinal Guinness. When you get near the end of pregnancy, the baby will move less because they run out of room. That is some outdated and dangerous advice. Any change in normal movements or reduction in movements should be checked out ASAP by a midwife or doctor. When on vacation, it's unsafe to carry cash. Use traveler's checks instead. American Express traveler's checks. Don't leave home without them. I remember getting traveler's checks on the first big trip I took without my family, only to then find out that practically nowhere took traveler's checks, and then when they did, you got your change back as cash anyway. It was in the year 2000, which was very much a transitional time where the old ways hadn't quite been replaced yet. I was 18, just out of school and traveling to the UK for an extended time. Travelers' checks were already on their way out, but were heavily advertised even on TV as, "Use them like currency, it's so much safer." Nobody told me that I could just exchange them at my bank, and this was at a time when all the information of the world wasn't readily available at any time from my pocket. So it ended up being an extreme hassle trying to find places to cash these things, since most places just didn't take them. So when I got the cash as change anyway, my thoughts were just, if I'm just going to end up carrying around cash anyway, why did I go through all the hoops, trials, and tribulation to have these traveler's checks? There were still mentions of traveler's checks in a lot of European restaurants and tourist stands when the narrator did his overseas trip in the early 2010s. I don't think I've seen any since then, although my good friend Google has more or less told me that any that exist are still technically valid, even if they aren't issued as much anymore. Now you can buy a sort of prepaid traveler's check gift card these days, which works more or less like a credit card. The week before I left for college, my dad bought a cheap electric etcher. He etched my social security number onto my TV and bike and a couple of other things. That way, if they were stolen and recovered, I could prove they were mine. Probably not done today. Holy cow, my dad did the same thing, and I thought it was just some madness he came up with. It's amazing to think that putting your SSN out there was commonplace dad wisdom one time. Always keep a quarter on you in case you need to make a call. I'm old enough to remember when a payphone call still cost a dime. Friends' parents were really annoyed when the price went up, and they had to give each of their kids a quarter for an emergency phone call instead of a dime. That call had better be a real emergency in that case. Be kind. Please rewind. Nobody's going to pay you to stare at a computer screen all day, said my mom in 1996 at the dawn of the internet. I was working on my computer science degree from 94 to 98. Shortly after graduating, I was visiting my family, and one of my uncles pulled me aside and said, "My son wants to do this computer thing. You do the computer thing, right? Can he actually get paid for it?" I responded with the fact that my first job out of college was making $48K a year as a junior developer, and to my family that's a lot of money for a first-time job. He raised his eyebrows and nodded. My cousin, his son, did not end up doing the computer thing, however. It is not advised to square dance on your period. One of my favorite videos from the 1940s on advice for girls on puberty. The Story of Menstruation, 1946. My mother-in-law told me that I should never lift anything while on my period because the strain will cause my uterus to fall out as well. In the original Boy Scouts handbook, if I recall, the way to deal with a self-deleting person who threw themselves onto train tracks was to jump on top of them and restrain their extremities within the confines of the rails and allow the train to simply pass over them. However, as far as I'm aware, most modern trains have much lower clearances and have monitoring and other equipment jutting from the bottom, leaving clearances of mere inches. How common was self-deletion by train that it needed to be in the goddamn Boy Scout handbook? Regularly clean out the ball and rollers on your mouse. If the picture on your computer monitor is discolored or distorted, try pressing the degausser button. Make sure to keep spare change on you for the payphone, just in case. If a high school student has a pager, he's probably a substance dealer. Yeah, they actually told us this at my high school. I went to middle school back when pagers were a thing as well, and they were banned in my school. A girl I knew had an insulin pump for her diabetes, which looks a lot like a pager, and a witch of a teacher tried to take it from her thinking it was a pager. The teacher refused to believe that it was an insulin pump, or possibly didn't know what an insulin pump was, and either sent the girl to the office or gave her a detention. When her parents found out about the whole thing, they came down on that school with the fury of 1,000 titans. I don't know specifically what the parents said or did, but they put the fear of God into them so hard that the girl essentially became invincible. She could have opened a brothel in the library and actually started dealing, and the administration wouldn't have said a thing. I was given a What to Expect When You're Expecting book, printed in the early or mid-70s, and boy, that thing has some gems in it. Up to 5 glasses of wine a day is safe. At least 2 are recommended. Up to 4 hard alcoholic beverages a week is okay. Snowsuits and car seats to keep babies warm in the car. Natural feeding is okay, but formula is better because it's scientifically better, and chest feeding should only be done if you're not able to afford formula. Up to 2 ounces of water beginning at 8 weeks, maybe 6. Up to half a packet of cigarettes a day is alright. The book also glorified the husband stitch. Google that if you want to hate the patriarchy. Too much cardio, more than 20 minutes of mild to moderate exercise a day, or actual hard exercises at all increases stillbirths and SIDs afterwards. When my brother was just a little baby, right at the start of the 2000s, the doctors told my parents to have him avoid commonly allergenic foods. When he was 2, he had peanuts. My parents didn't think anything of it as they'd waited to give him anything like that for a couple of years. But he had an allergic reaction, and they rushed him to the hospital. He'd developed a life-threatening allergy to peanuts and tree nuts. 2 years later, I was born. Same deal, I wasn't given nuts, though I was tested when I was around 4 with no sign of an allergy. So I went on living my life without any nuts whatsoever, not because I have an allergy, but because my brother had one. So in 5th grade, I was given a granola bar at baseball practice. I didn't know it had peanuts in it, but I asked my dad to take me home because I felt horrible. I had an extremely sore throat. He assumed I just didn't want to be there and to play video games or something. But my paranoid mum, you can imagine why, asked me if I had anything to eat. I had another test, and sure enough, I had a life-threatening allergy to peanuts and tree nuts. Not life-threatening the first time, usually. It turns out, after more recent studies, the exact opposite is supposed to be done to young children. They must eat all kinds of foods that are commonly allergenic so as to make their bodies used to said food, and much less likely to develop an allergy. If you're wondering, me and my brother underwent an experimental new treatment over the past couple of years called oral immunity therapy, or OIT. We now take daily doses of around 5 peanuts and other nuts we're allergic to. Now we can eat anywhere we want without needing to carry epinephrine. Thanks for listening to my TED Talk. Well, all the stuff about pursuing girls that are playing hard to get certainly hasn't aged well. If you're into a guy, play hard to get. Boys love a challenge. I always knew that advice was horrible, toxic bullcrap in my teens, but I thought I was just easy or slutty for not wanting to play games with any guy I liked. Turns out I was just a normal functioning human being that wanted to have an actual conversation with someone I might want to date. What do you know? You know, what really hasn't aged well is the fact that my mother was the one who gave me that kind of advice. My father wasn't around, so she gave me some of those typical talks growing up. My mother said I had to learn that sometimes no means no, and sometimes no means keep trying. I had to figure out the difference. My grandfather said that was stupid and don't put up with women that play games. He was a straightforward kind of guy. Luckily, I took his advice. It made much more sense to me and it was easier. Good to know that even when that bullcrap was being peddled, there were smart people in both genders who instinctively knew it was nonsense. Good for them. I wish we could fully excise it once and for all because we're still dealing with the ramifications today. If a video game doesn't work at first, just blow on it. Ooh, that savings account is a good investment, what with the 0.05 interest and all. Don't talk to strangers on the internet. Also, don't meet or date strangers from the internet. I was an early pioneer here. I met my now husband online in 1999. It was scandalous and risky back then. Lol, I said to my mum. Meeting a guy in a bar or a gym is safe, is it? At least the guys online had their crap enough together to get online back then. It wasn't something everyone did back then. Oh, if you want to use the internet, make sure no one's using the landline. To pay for college, just work part-time at a restaurant waiting tables. Then you can avoid all of that student debt. When people say, just be patient and love will find a way, this was said in a time when people were outside a lot more. Nowadays, someone can go to work and go home and sit at their computer every day for years without ever being close to finding someone. I think nowadays you have to go out of your way to find someone, or at the very least go out of your bubble and be social. Adding to this, there's a concept in sociology called the third place. The first place is home, the second work. Basically, you have a home community and a work community. The third place used to be things like churches, social clubs, and fraternities, essentially a revolving door of new people. But we haven't really replaced those things since they fell out of style. Most people only have two places, which makes meeting new people and being involved with your community, not just in, immensely difficult. It's also why, for a lot of people, it was so much easier to make new friends and meet new people when they were still going to school. School was your third place when you were young. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Just show up at the office with a resume and don't leave until you get an interview. One of my favorite Reddit stories from the last year was a guy who posted about how his father, laid off due to COVID-19, told him, the lazy son, how he was going to show him how to do it, made his decision about what place he was now going to work for, and basically burst into the manager's office with the "I'm not leaving until you hire me" shtick. He was arrested. The guy who wrote about it noted that in the 3 weeks since the event, anytime it came up, the dad insisted it was a misunderstanding and the company would come around any day now. That it's never a good idea to wear a mask to the bank, although that's only old-fashioned now due to pandemic-related reasons. If they say no the first time, just keep trying. My dad accidentally raised me really well in that respect. If you don't hear yes, the answer is no. If the answer is no, don't ask again. Just because the answer was yes once, it doesn't mean the answer is always yes. To find your first job, like as a teenager, just go from place to place filling out paper applications. Nope. Now pretty much everywhere just says apply online and we might call. Last year I applied at the In-N-Out, a popular burger place in the southwest US. On their website they recommended going in person and requesting an application. I got there and they told me they only really do online applications. So I applied online and never got a response. You may fascinate a woman by handing her a piece of cheese. I mean, this one's still true. I'd definitely be fascinated if some rando handed me cheese out of context. Show your employer loyalty and they'll be loyal to you. My family is super old-fashioned and don't understand that this is bullcrap at all. My father spent 30 years in the military and then had to leave because he was too fat. He entered the job market at almost 50 and failed miserably. He had no idea how to compete. Everything he knew was what his father taught him 50 years ago. The poor guy almost lost his house before he found a job to support himself. He got an offer 2 years later for more money, and it was still close at home, and he turned it down because he feels like he owes his current job. He just doesn't get it. My friend believed this for so long and would stay late every day even after all of us told him they're a business and don't give a crap about you. When he was eventually released after COVID cutbacks, he understood. I hope, anyway. My grandmother used to say, "Don't drink water after eating fruit or you'll get sick." Apparently this comes from a time when people drank from wells. The sugar from the fruit would allow bacteria from the water to ferment in the stomach. It's no longer a problem with modern water supplies. Oh, if you have bullies, just ignore them. Honestly, this was never applicable, as someone who's dealt with bullies for as long as I can remember. It's an unrealistic expectation that a-holes like me would just stop because you don't care. It's really hard to ignore a bully that knocks you to the ground and has his buddies start kicking you like a football while he literally jumps his whole weight on your head in an attempt to break open your skull. Broken bones and black eyes make them stop. Honestly, nothing short of that worked. Roast them so hard that everyone else is making fun of them for a while, you're going to get jumped on the way out at the end of the day. If you ignore them, they double down. If you talk it out, no one is a reasonable bully. Just follow better advice. Be professional, be polite, but have a plan to beat up everyone you meet. Oh, 1900s medicine. Sore throat? Smoke a cigarette. Depression? Smoke a cigarette. Pain from pregnancy contraction? Smoke a whole pack. So modern capitalism may have its own host of horrifying dystopian problems, but at least we're temporarily past the stage where adverts can tell you to drink a Coca-Cola or smoke cigarettes if you're feeling unwell. Although, with the current administration, who knows? To get a job, walk on into any place of business. They're always hiring, and talking to the manager will get you that job starting today. Firm handshake, get the nice paper for your copies of your CV. I remember my teachers telling me, don't study these new trendy subjects at university like media, video editing, or tech. You should focus on traditional subjects like literature, history, and so on. 15 years after graduating with my Bachelor of Arts and Master of Arts in English Lit, I now work minimum wage in a shop. Frick my life. Don't talk about salaries at work. That was just bullcrap employers perpetuated to stop you working out you were on less than other colleagues. I work my butt off and well out of working hours to manage awful clients that the sales team wrangles in, as well as the rest of my colleagues in my department. I recently found out that the sales team makes about $40,000 more starting pay and gets a monthly bonus. I've been on the sales calls before where they oversell and then wash their hands of the issues, and then they're able to end their day at a reasonable hour. I wouldn't have realized just how screwed over and undervalued some departments are if people didn't discuss their salaries. And I know sales teams are vital to growth, but client retention is important in maintaining that. In general, don't overwork employees and pay them what they're worth. If your team is drowning, then get them resources. Adults in the 90s and early 2000s, don't put your personal information online. So fast forward to 2021, 500 million Facebook users' phone numbers, names, and emails were leaked. I wonder how many of those are people aged 50 or up. If you work hard, you'll be treated right. You're not always going to have a calculator on you. Learn to do the math properly. The cost of housing will never outpace affordability. Just go get a job in the mailroom and work your way up. Oh, that advice given to young girls. That boy's being mean to you because he has a crush on you. Nope, that boy is just being a jerk, and that behavior is not a good thing. My dad would repeatedly advise that I go into as many places as I could and drop off a printed CV for their records, and that this was the best way to get a job. It wasn't true then. Few places accepted unsolicited applications and then they threw them out, and it definitely isn't true now. Nowhere accepts unsolicited. Applications are all done online. To finish your plate. I just teach my kids to stop eating when they feel they've had enough. No need to stuff their faces with more food just because of whatever. I'm not American, by the way. I absolutely agree, but our daughter of 5 years takes 2 bites of her dinner and then goes, "I'm not hungry anymore," and then 5 minutes after the table is cleared she goes, "I'm hungry." So yeah, we've started being a little more strict with her having to eat her food. Go to college and you'll get a good job. One day you'll meet the right person, fall in love and get married, and you'll be happy. What a load of horse crap. If the baby won't stop crying, check to make sure the diaper pin isn't sticking into him. You should duel your friend in a sword fight for slandering you. Oh my god, grandpas are always like, "So I pestered her and followed her around for months and months, even though she told me to go away, until she finally went out with me. And we've been married for 50 years this month." Yeah, don't do that. When driving, keep your hands at 10 and 2. That actually increases the chance of having your arms crushed by a deploying airbag. I learned in 2016 and was encouraged to use positions 8 and 4 for that reason. The customer is always right. This advice is still correct, but most people don't understand it. It doesn't mean do whatever your customer wants or they have a right to be a butthead, but rather, if you create a product or service that nobody wants, you'll fail, or something like that. The saying has been grossly misused over the years. The more you know. If you want to show a company how interested you are in a position, keep checking back. Don't let them forget you. Man, turns out a lot of us were just forced to see this one through, huh? I remember thinking there was no way this would work when I was younger and was forced to do it anyway. And I was completely correct, apart from one gentleman who actually took my CV and said he liked my drive, then never called back and disappeared from the store afterwards. Good times. "Show her who's the boss. Just go right up and kiss her," said by Creed in the office. My dad would always jokingly say, hug your crush when no one's looking, and if she doesn't resist, she has a crush on you, and if she does, just pretend it was an accident. And apparently my brother tried this. Guess which parent refused to show his face when the school called? Take it like a man. Men don't cry. As a woman who wants to see men grow and express their emotions, it seems damaging to make them adhere to an outdated gender norm. Sort laundry by type. Oh, you're going to need to learn cursive for those job applications. Oh, you can trust him. He's a banker. Ditto with politicians. You need to go to college. My mother still believes you can bombard people with inquiries about employment, even after the pandemic lockdowns started. If you crank your eggplant too much, you'll go blind. I'm sure the average person on the internet knows by now this isn't true. If you spare the Switch, you'll spoil the child. You should spoil your children. Buy the Nintendo Switch. Yeah, maybe just not the Nintendo Switch 2 just yet. That press conference was a disaster and it looks real bad. 20 years ago, people said, you'll want to save up 30 to 50 grand so you can put a down payment down on a house. Now you just add another zero onto that and hope that someone doesn't come in with a cash offer. You should only eat oysters in months with an R in them. It was something to do with oyster season and how they aren't any good during the summer, May, June, July, August. Nowadays, with oyster farms, it's not really a risk anymore. You shouldn't date someone from another ethnic background. That's the one my mother taught me. Don't spend too much time online, you'll ruin your career. Now that same teacher is teaching via Teams. Oh sweetie, can you wait until after 11 p.m. to make a long-distance phone call? That's when the rates go down. If you want to talk to someone again, make sure that you've got your pager on you. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Yes, it was when we ate breakfast, then worked in the fields for 12 hours. Now you should eat when you're hungry. Don't spend it all in one place. I love the convenience of getting everything I need in one place. How do you call out a boomer complaining about kids these days? Didn't you guys have pet rocks in response to an adult having a temper tantrum over fidget spinners? Your generation is soft. It's all the participation trophies you were given. Sure, but who gave us those participation trophies again? Who was that? You know what's really strange about participation trophies? The other parents really push them on you if you don't want to participate. After soccer season last year, I said that we didn't need to get trophies because we didn't win the league. I'm the coach of a U10 girls team. The parents went out and bought the trophies for the kids anyway. I guess the point was lost on them. The kids could not have cared less about the trophies. I think the parents were the ones that wanted them more. Yeah, nah, shut the F up, George. You were doing lines when you were their age. To this day, I still think about that grandma at the grocery store. What a great wife. Context, I was shopping with my girlfriend, we were laughing, and I accidentally bumped the old geezer's cart. He flipped the frick out with a whole rant about how horrible young people are today, and his wife sat him the F down. I'm living in Germany, and there was an old man complaining for no reason to a friend and me, saying something like, "With soldiers like you, there's no war to win." My friend looked him in the eyes and said, "And with soldiers like you, we lost 2 of them." This might be my most favorite comment in the entire world. It's just a bonus that it's Germany. Not to diss most Germans nowadays, y'all are pretty cool. My grandma said something along the lines of, "Young people are so offended these days." So I reminded her that back when she was born, women were being arrested for wearing pants in public. I usually come back with, "Says the generation that has a full-blown temper tantrum every time someone says, 'Happy Holidays.'" My father-in-law is 55. Whenever he starts with that, "Your generation is so offended by everything," crap, I just casually remind him that he comes from a time when people would shut stuff down if someone of a darker skin tone drank out of the same water fountain as them. My uncle complaining about kids these days in front of his mother, who's 96 and still has all of her sass. She responded with, "Yeah, because you were just a frickin' ray of sunshine to raise, weren't you?" For the record, the uncle is a butthole completely of his own volition. I don't know how he turned out that way considering the wonderful woman who raised him. I don't know why half of the narrator's sassy grandma characters in this video are coming out with Aussie accents. I guess it's because there's something inherently funny about a vicious old Aussie duck. They're a magnificent species, truly. I work at a bookstore in a smaller, retirement-heavy town. So as you can guess, we get tons of old people in every day, and they all think they're the most important person in the store. One time we had this particularly bad old lady who wanted a book that we didn't have in stock yet. So I tried to explain to her that the book came out in just shy of a couple of months, and if she wanted, then we could pre-order it for her. She was not having any of that. She claimed I was lying and trying to steal her money. So I offered to show her the other books we had by that author, which was met with a stern no and her informing me very loudly that she had read all of the author's other books and that I could find a way to get her that book today, and she wasn't leaving until she had it in her hand. I called a manager to the front who again tried to explain the situation to absolutely no positive result. Eventually, she finally looked at me behind the counter and on the other side of my manager and told me, "My grandkids can order anything they want online and it's there in a couple of days, but my book will take me 2 months to get to my home? You're just trying to punish me for being old." She then demanded my manager send me away and that I've made her very upset. He looked her dead in the eyes and told her that he could send me away, but if she wanted this book to ever get ordered, she might consider being a little nicer to the people whose job it was to get it to her. I have never seen a walker move so quickly out of a store. She was gone in seconds. Me and 2 of my friends were sitting on a bus. It was a Friday afternoon and we were going to a concert, so each of us had a couple of beers in hand. 3 old ladies got on the bus and told us that we should give them our seats. Since half the seats on the bus were empty, we just told them to sit somewhere else. They sat down behind us and started crap-talking really loudly about us and our generation. They said we were lazy drunkards who were good for nothing, all the usual stuff. They were ranting for a good 10 minutes until one of them said something like, "I just hope when they're this old they'll know what being treated like this feels like." At this moment, a 30-something-year-old guy who sat near them stood up and said something like, "God, you know what? I hope I die before 60 so I won't become a bitter old crone like you are." And then he got off the bus. The old hags were speechless. A keynote speaker was basically talking crap about millennials at a corporate function I attended. My boss was like, "Wow, he really hit the nail on the head with your generation." My response was, "We didn't raise ourselves with those standards, you all brought us up this way." It actually made him pause and consider that. A young guy on my team at work. Other people were complaining about millennials in 2018. I pointed out that them not being 38 yet also makes them millennials. I love millennials complaining about millennials, especially when they're all like, "I'm not a millennial, I don't do X, Y, or Z. I work for what I have, blah blah blah." Yeah, no generalized millennial does that, and many of them work their butts off hardcore. You guys are so spoiled nowadays. I was looking at an apartment near me and said, "These apartments are over $2,000 a month." Well, maybe you should be looking at a studio. This is a studio, with 2 other roommates. The $2,000 is just a third of the rent. Well, good luck. How much did your apartment cost again? Which one? I had several when I was younger. I stared at him for a while. My dad was married, had owned multiple new cars, and had 2 kids and built a brand new house by the time he was 30 years old. I saw his high school report cards, and to be honest, with all the F's and D's, he should have failed. The guy didn't do a lick of work in high school, got terrible grades, but was still rewarded with a job the day after he graduated high school that afforded him all of this on that high school diploma. He's another boomer who thinks every younger generation is lazy. Old people talk a lot of crap about this generation until they suddenly turn off their Wi-Fi and can't remember how to turn it back on, and then I'm suddenly the master of information and resources. This old guy shouting at my brother, "Kids these days don't know how to save up for college the old-fashioned way, through odd jobs and hard labor." My brother retorted, "I am literally mowing your lawn to save up for college." I really have no room to talk. In my day, people thought mullets were cool and girls aquanetted their bangs to the ceiling. Every generation thinks the next ones are the ones who are bat-crap crazy. I was on the train reading a book on my phone. An older lady made the comment that kids these days are always on their phone instead of books. I responded and told her that phones now have the ability to store books, and I told her that I was reading, and then asked her what book she was reading since she was such a bookworm. She had no answer since she didn't have a book. So I said, "Ugh, baby boomers these days always have their noses in other people's business instead of a book." She called me rude and I told her to please refrain from speaking to me because I was in the middle of a really good book. Look guys, things were hard for you, things are also hard for modern kids. It's just a different kind of hard. Millennials. Usually every generation has it better than the ones that came before. That's progress. That's as it should be. Millennials are probably the generation more thoroughly screwed over by their predecessors than any other. Massive debt, ruined environment, overpopulation, wealth disparity, and for all that, the generations that are screwing them over call them spoiled and entitled. A great quote I read once went something along the lines of, "We knew those participation trophies were bullcrap when you gave them to us, but we accepted them because it seemed important to you. If we had known you'd hold them over our heads someday, we would have told you to shove them up your butts." Suppose the millennials had told their parents to take those participation trophies and shove them. The parents would have said that showed how ungrateful and disrespectful the kids were. If the kids accept the participation trophies, they're bad for having them. This is a no-win situation for the kids. No matter what they do here, people will complain about kids these days. The narrator has had participation trophies successfully hung over his head for a fair chunk of his life, until people like the commenters above pointed out to him that no, he didn't ask for them. I don't remember receiving them with anything other than bemusement and generally lost them pretty quickly afterwards because I just didn't care that I got them. They were a token to make our parents feel better. It annoys me no end that I can't make that comeback retroactively. Just remember that when we were kids, we wore parachute pants, listened to a flock of seagulls, and thought the California raisins were cool. Me responding to someone my age belittling my kids. My coworker said that millennials were lazy and entitled. She's 26. I pointed out that she was a millennial, and she replied saying that I was more of a millennial than her. I'm Gen Z. That's not how that works. That's not how any of this works. My response to whenever parents, teachers, or elders in general say kids these days is adults these days can't teach their kids a thing. As an example, say my parents use a word I've never heard of, I ask them what it meant, they go for the kids these days thing, and I go, yeah, you're right, kids don't know a damn thing these days. They could have known that if their parents taught them. Here are some facts. Violent crime is down compared to when Gen Xers like me were a kid. Teen pregnancy is down. If kids being whiny and disrespectful and addicted to screens is the price we have to pay for that, then yes please, I'll have the whining. It's a lot better than being R-worded or murdered. This generation has no respect, blah blah blah, spoken by a grown man with a useless son. So who raised that generation then? You know, my dad had this thing about respect. Everything he didn't like was apparently disrespectful. You used the last of the hand soap? You didn't like the same music he did? You had the gall not to cook your own scrambled eggs the way he liked? Well, apparently that's disrespectful and we were punished for it. So when I hear someone complain that people don't respect them, I get a little apprehensive. In any case, if you have to demand respect, you probably don't deserve it. Oh, you were complaining about African Americans calling for equal rights when you were their age, Harold. People in nursing homes are so savage, man. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A few weeks ago, I walked up in line at the express checkout in the grocery store to hear the two seniors in front of me complaining about kids these days. Conversation ranged from how rude they were, to how stupid they were, to how inconsiderate they were, and then the old lady unpacked 14 items out of her cart onto the belt in the 10 items or less lane, while still griping about how young people are inconsiderate. I literally laughed out loud. She looked at me, looked at her items, and then the full context of what she was doing registered. The look on her face was actually amazing. I didn't say anything else. I just smiled at her and she turned her back to me and shut the heck up. I am part of the generation after the millennials. I'm 18, so please let me know if I'm wrong. I feel like every generation has it rough in their own way. Baby boomers were raised by a generation that lived through both world wars and a depression. Millennials were raised during the Great Recession, September 11th, and a couple of other events. What I'm getting at is that this whole "we have it harder than you" rock-throwing contest is just stupid. Meanwhile, my generation has no idea what to do. We have one generation telling us what we do is pointless, and one generation telling us that we're spoiled. I get so angry over this whole generational war. Maybe I don't have a right because I didn't experience it. So here's what I've experienced in my life. 1. Kids are Control-Alt-Deleting on life because they believe that what they think doesn't matter or they're too afraid to get help. 2. We're told that what we do won't matter. Don't deny it, you've seen posts about how people had a plan and then they ended up working somewhere they really didn't want to because they had no choice. 3. We're treated even worse than millennials and boomers because apparently we're just kids. And 4. The hope, if any, that we're given is shut down or apparently false. If we say, "I want to be an artist," a boomer will go, "What kind of job is that? It's not one that's what it was." And the millennial says, "Don't try it. Finding jobs for it is hard and you'll end up in debt." What the frick is the point then? No wonder we all want to Control-Alt-Delete. We don't have a future according to both the generations. Maybe I'm wrong for thinking this, but I'm just one of a few that's decided that ending things would be pointless. I can't leave my brother alone. Sometimes I regret not following that through. Thanks for letting me rant though. And shout out to Gen X for raising my generation but also getting a crappy time of things. My parents are Gen Xers and they had it real bad too. I'm glad some of you believe in my generation, more so than me. I believe we're putting our foot down more, which is a good thing, but I also believe that we need to balance it. I see some of the bad parts of what my generation is bringing, and I hope others will too. A Gen X or 40-year-old-ish woman saw her nephew and niece watching a YouTube video of some gamer and started pointing it out to her friends. She said, "Did you know that kids these days watch videos of other people playing video games?" The Gen Xers all started laughing together. I answered, "And what? You watch sports, don't you?" "Well, that's not the same thing." "It 100% is though. You buy jerseys so you can pretend to be on a team you don't qualify for, so that you can cheer on teenagers playing a sport that you don't play. Plus, if I don't know I want to buy a $50 game, I don't have to. I can watch a playthrough and see if it's worth it." "Oh, that's not why they do it." "So what? At least if I buy a game I can play it nearly as good as the people that I watch. If I got you a football, could you kick a 40-yard field goal?" Most of the time when I hear kids these days, I say, "Kids are supposed to be stupid. What's your excuse?" When mine complain, I just turn off the life support. Well, that's a much more extreme form of comeback than most of the ones we're seeing here, and however much your parents get on your back, I don't feel we can quite condone that on the channel here. When my fellow boomers go off on it, I normally just roll my eyes and say, "Yeah, because we were so much better." Personally, I like the way that these millennials are becoming activists. It shows they care. The students at the school my husband works at organized a peaceful firearm reform demonstration. When I was in high school, we could hardly organize a sleepover, and I literally never ever read or watched the news. It blew my mind when I got to college and had to figure out who to vote for. From some dark part of the webinet long ago, someone who was probably in the baby boomer generation was complaining about how kids get participation trophies for everything. Someone replied, "So who gave us the participation trophies? We didn't ask for them." Market cause scary workable cake sand divide bells file license? Thanks for writing in. I think people who care about kids of today this much have got something wrong with them. Except kids falling off bikes. Frick, I could watch kids falling off bikes all day. I don't give a crap about your kids. I've heard people call millennials weak. I find that funny because it kind of seems to me like millennials are capable of changing with the times and keeping up with progress, while older generations refuse progress and shun anyone who has it. Just because we don't have to walk in the snow 10 miles to school doesn't mean we'd be incapable of that. Plus, why the hell do they talk about things like that longingly? I thought millennials could change with the times, and for the most part they can, but after seeing Reddit's reaction to Fortnite and its fan base in the year of 2019, I'd have to disagree. Be nice, those kids will be wiping your butt one day. Some lady at the library was complaining about how children are using iPads too young and how they shouldn't be using technology at all because it's bad for them. I told her that the kids that are using iPads at the age of 3 are going to be the same adults who invent the most amazing technology that'll change the world someday. And then I offered her help to send an email because she's apparently too old to know how. Yeah, I disagree with you though. It just works style computing has only made people more allergic to technology. How many people today know how to use the command prompt? That used to be literally everybody. "Hey, shut up," is my go-to response. It's simple, elegant, and timeless. I just say, "The one I raised is great. How did you do with yours?" I was at a punk concert, swinging udders, and one of my friends, being a first-generation punk like myself, says, "These young punks don't have no respect." I replied, "No respect? It's freaking punk rock, man." Everyone started laughing and we enjoyed the gig. I overheard this guy complaining about how kids these days think gay marriage should be allowed, and a person responded, "At least we weren't racist and sexist." I live in a small town and any minor crime makes for amazing debates on the local Facebook page. At one point, some kid threatened another with a knife and the whole place went mental with, "The world is going downhill" and "What is it with kids these days?" So I did something that I'd been wanting to do for a while. I started a thread on there detailing how my granddad had been threatened by an actual gang of lads with Stanley knives and even straight razors, which should have been a clue, giving details of exactly where it happened, but crucially leaving out the date. After the usual outcry of, "Kids these days," I explained the truth. It was all true, but happened in the late 1940s, and the gang in question were teddy boys from a nearby city. My granddad died before I was born, and the pub it happened outside was demolished 25 years ago. I pointed out that this was nothing new, it's always happened, and if anything, crime in the area is down on what it used to be. If anything, kids are becoming more moral and law-abiding. A huge amount of people agreed too, and there was an entertaining discussion about all sorts of crimes and events from the past several decades that have taken place in our little town. Those who criticize this generation forget who raised it. You know the old days when people started wars and killed thousands of people? The old days when showing skin was weird? The old days when we started 2 wars that led to trillions of dollars of debt? Those old days when we had separate but equal? And when Christianity was dominant in school and government? Insert your complaint here. Yeah, those were the days. Older Gen Xer here, please don't blame us, we're not our parents. Also, a lot of us are computer and tech literate. Some of us are industry experts. We work with millennials. My kids are 30 and 34. I sure don't give them a hard time. I'm not my parents. Stop lumping us in because we're grey-haired. Please. If I had the courage, I'd probably say, you know, I bet your parents said the same thing about your generation, and their parents said the same thing about theirs. I heard a lady say, "Oh my god, the Fortnite dance is so stupid." Her husband piped in, "Shut up, Martha, I still have that video of you doing the Macarena." There was then silence for an extended period of time. This was all overheard by me at a local coffee shop. Well, the one thing that both of those cringy dances of their generations have in common is that they'll never equal the glory of the Charleston, a dance so cool that I'm positive the kids are still doing it at the discotheques of today. While I'm older, each generation develops their own rivalry with the preceding and upcoming generation. Never trust anyone over 30 was such a common mantra at one time that it worked its way into many sci-fis in the 60s and 70s. Truth is, every generation feels the last generation screwed them by not giving them a pristine world, and the older generation is annoyed that they're not given credit for the things that they've done to make it better. The world was messed up when we got it, we try to make it better where we could, and it'll still be messed up when you get it. And you'll try to fix it in little ways and pass a messed up world to the generation after. Just keep moving forward. There are less wars today than any before, there's less global poverty, and people live longer and healthier. That's nothing to scoff at least. Funnily enough, it was on Facebook. A post about millennials taking basic classes like cooking, sewing, and laundry. The post was something like, "Oh my god, millennials, how useless and ridiculous." The response was that the current generation was so proactive that they seek out the skills the previous generation failed to teach them. Hot damn. All I'm going to add is that I'm a Gen Xer and I'm so glad I grew up when I did. Kids these days face a ton of pressure from every direction. Being a kid or younger person today looks exhausting. How did your life turn out after you bought a one-way ticket and started everything from scratch? I did this when I was 16. I took one backpack worth of clothes, said goodbye to my family, and flew off to the other side of Australia. Just before I left, I found a place to stay via Gumtree, which was a similar website to Craigslist. Being young and naive, I didn't realize the full extent of what I was doing, and soon realized that without a job, I just couldn't afford my rent. I ended up in the hospital, then in youth shelters for a few months, and at one stage during that, I had to stay on the streets for about 2 weeks. So that was fun. Long story short though, this was over 10 years ago, and now I live in a different state altogether and work in the financial industry, doing quite well for myself. I have no regrets. I met some amazing people and had some crazy journeys. From rural Mississippi to Southern California, I was bartending and I saved up a couple of $1,000 which I used to prepay for 2 months in a hotel. I packed what I could into my car, including my dog, and drove here. I kinda had the attitude that I would even work at McDonald's if I had to, but I found a decent job after about a month and a half and things worked out. Best decision I ever made. I've done something similar several times. When I was young, I used to work 2 full-time jobs at a time, save up as much money as I could in a couple of years, and then quit my jobs, sell everything that didn't fit on my bicycle, buy a one-way ticket somewhere else, and then see how far I could get on the money that I had. I did that 3 times in all, but I'd come home in between to make money. I could get roughly 1-to-1 time exchange and travel for just as long as I worked. I highly recommend it, but it is a game for the young. For trip 1, I started in London, Western Europe, Eastern Europe before the wall fell, and the Middle East. Trip 2 started in Amsterdam, Western Europe, North Africa, across the Sahara, West Africa, Central and East Africa. Trip 3 started in Athens, the Middle East, India, Southeast Asia, 6 years of pedaling altogether. My ex-wife ended our marriage totally out of the blue. I was devastated. I bought a one-way plane ticket to the other side of the world with £1,000 sterling in my back pocket. No job, nowhere to live. That was around 4 years ago. I now have a great job, a gorgeous girlfriend, and a house overlooking the beach. Thanks, ex-wife. I had a one-way gas pedal. I sold all of my stuff, got in my little Civic and drove across Canada to Vancouver sight unseen. Been here for 15 years now, new friends, married, kid, own a business, everything's good. Now we're thinking of doing the same thing as a family, packing up and moving overseas to where our ancestors came from. Why not? Life's too short to stay in one place forever. The narrator was thinking that he'd never be brave enough, but then now that you mention it, I did a softer version of this 9 years ago, and I'm now a business owner in the country I live in now, so yeah, sometimes your little crazy trip sneaks up on you and turns into your new life. At the age of 27, I sold everything in my house, moved from the southeast corner of the country to the Pacific Northwest. It was a wild drive, and it's been wild times since then. I've gone on to accomplish the greatest things I've ever done in my life so far. There have been dark, lonely times, but also the best times I've had in my life so far. Seattle is great. Leaving it all behind isn't for everyone. It takes a strong person. You will feel alone, you will doubt your decision, but if it's something you've always wanted to do, you'll be grateful in the end and you'll become a better version of yourself. If you truly want something out of your life, go get it. Period. Let nothing stop you. That deathbed is coming for you, same as it is for everyone else. Are you okay with spending your time where you are for the rest of your life? Or would you look back with regret? We get so caught up in life that we forget that we only have this one chance to do what we love. Don't be curious forever. Go out. Go after what you want. The price was steep, but I paid it gladly. It was an investment in myself. In the end, the decision must be based on the real question you must ask yourself. Who do you want to be? Not what do you want to be. Do you want to be the person who left or the person who stayed? I'm in my early 20s and just ended a long-term unhealthy relationship and moved across the country to California to completely start over. I saved up a few months' expenses back home and found a place on Craigslist to move into before I flew in. It took me about a month to find a seasonal job, and luckily as that job ended, I got hired on to a nice food chain. I've been here in Stockton for 7 months and I currently live paycheck to paycheck. I don't own a vehicle, so I bike everywhere, but I feel so free and in control of my life now. I don't ever regret coming to California, even though I live in one of the worst possible cities to have hope in. These other stories make me feel like a silly, complacent fool. I want an adventure. No, I'm a Baggins from Bag End. The best thing I have ever done was move to the other side of the planet. I would rather be a waitress in Germany than a professional anything in Australia. The lifestyle, people, location, smell, food, transport, socks, toothpicks, luggage, beer, watches, supermarkets, ice cream, makeup, speakers, printers, housing, wine, cleaning products, and dogs, they suit me better than the comfort and safety of Australia. I love everything about Germany and I will do anything to never leave. I don't regret it. Not even once. I'm originally from Maryland. I've had a few IT-related jobs, but got into bartending. I worked in bars for 8 years, dead-end jobs, all of them. I lived the bar lifestyle. Good money, but then I went nowhere. A buddy I went to school with hooked me up with a job in San Francisco working at a game studio. I packed a bag, grabbed $2,000, one-way ticket and moved. Worked at that studio for a year, got another job, then another, then another. Busted my butt for 4 years now, but I have a well-paying job at a great company with plenty of new friends and a career. I don't even have the urge to visit Maryland. I convinced my boyfriend that we should quit our jobs and move into a custom camper on the back of a truck. We've got a couple of duffel bags of clothes, our dog, a couple of milk crates of books, and a lot of cooking equipment. Now we travel around making pies for people and giving them away for free. We don't anticipate being nomadic forever. In fact, we'd like to go back to Michigan when our pie tour is over and open a donation-based cafe. But we're both loving the tiny nomadic life right now. 3 years ago, I left a good-paying job, my incredibly loving friends, my parents, and a lifestyle that left me wanting for little to finish my education. I had, at the time, been paying $1,000 a month in tuition and was close to graduating, but knew that I needed to have a different degree and continue on to grad school. I was accepted to a school that was $45,000 a year, so I looked elsewhere and found a place with a great reputation and about a third of the cost. Everything fell apart for me within a month of my move. I spent all of my savings to start this new life. Since then, I've been struggling so hard just to make ends meet that I haven't been able to save up enough to move back home. Each semester I stay here, I get further and further off track. Instead of working towards my goals of graduation and grad school acceptance, I'm having to spend each day simply getting through it. Just when I think I'm finally back on track, something else happens and I'm back to square one. I went from $55,000 a year to minimum wage part-time. I went from a 1,500 square foot condo with an in-unit high-efficiency washer and dryer, walking distance from rapid transit, to having to share with a stranger because one-bedroom apartments are too expensive for me and begging for rides to the laundrette. I've taken classes one by one while 2 full classes of graduates have gone on without me. If I could do it all over, I would have never come here. I would have found some way to make it work back home. I would have gone to a lesser school or lived in a bad neighborhood or, I don't know, I just would never have come here. The worst part is how isolated I am. I don't have any family remotely nearby. All the friends I made graduated and moved away. Then the friends I made after that have graduated and are packing up, as I type to move away. Nobody comes to visit me and I don't have the means to visit them. Even if I had the money to rent a car, my work schedule just didn't allow it. The only days I had off were the days when I was in class for 6 hours. I regret absolutely everything about this. I made a decision knowing that I had the drive and ability to reach my goals, but I forgot that some things depend on the actions of others. I was waiting for one of these. I figured that not all of these stories could statistically be winners. I'm sorry that things just didn't work out for you with that trip. I did do a quick check of your profile and it seems like at least you've moved on to pastures new, and I hope things are better now. I'd finished college, I had no direction with my life, so I moved to Honduras and worked at an orphanage for a year. It was great. I ended up coming back to the States afterwards, went to law school, graduated, passed the bar and got a job, and I'm now getting the itch to go and try something intense and new once more. Any suggestions? I ran out of money and had to come home and get a job. I regret that bit of it. I got a traveling IT job that had me going to different towns every day. I was on the road for 6 months and lived out of my tent the whole time, utilizing dry cleaners to maintain that professional image. I was grossing like $1,600 a week and I had every Friday and Sunday off. I've never been happier. Eventually I upped it to a Cadillac of pop-up campers and that's why I'm a pop-up king. I met a girl on America Online. It was in 1994. I was in Kansas, she was in Colorado. I traveled out there to make sure she wasn't a guy, and she wasn't. I went back to Kansas. A couple of months later I bought a plane ticket to Denver and sent for my stuff. We've been married for over 17 years. We both graduated from college and I got a law degree. None of it would have happened if I hadn't taken the risk. It's really weird because I've never had a want to do this before, but lately I've been having a very real urge to drop everything and drive to the Pacific Northwest with my car and a few prized possessions. I don't have a lot saved, but probably enough to do it and afford myself a couple of months to get on my feet in a new location. I'm fortunate to know so many great people here where I am, but I just can't shake this urge. Best decision ever. Had a baby, came to Colorado for a wedding, and loved it so much a week later we left our baby here with her grandma while we went home to upstate New York. Packed as much stuff as we could in our 97 Buick, and after a 4-day trip of chaotic mishaps we finally made it to our new home. I enrolled in a massage school and I couldn't be happier. Plus, Mary J was legalized that same month. Winning. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I didn't regret my move at all. When I was flushed from basic at 18 due to severe arthritis in my elbows, I was a weightlifter in high school and that came back to bite me in the butt, I was stuck without anywhere to go. My grandma had just moved to France, there was no family to speak of that were alive or cared enough to offer me a couch, so I sold all the valuables I still had and bought a Greyhound ticket to Portland, Oregon. That was 3 years ago this past April. Since then, I've traveled all over the West Coast, learned how to skateboard, saw a driftwood tree as wide as a house is tall, met probably hundreds of homeless kids, and traveled anywhere I wanted, anytime I wanted. I've been to almost every state, minus the far northern ones as I'm from the Keys in Florida, and crap from Ohio north is too cold for me. I know, I'm a wimp. I've traveled Route 66, seen Yellowstone, Mount Rushmore, the Grand Canyon, the museums and memorials in Washington, D.C., along with the oddities like the largest frying pan and yarn ball and all that jazz. Then I met some people from a group called a Rainbow Family, whom to this day I keep in contact with, and thanks to that group, my life changed for the better. I was stuck in Vegas. Horrible, I know. And lo and behold, I met a bunch of dudes headed to Northeast Tennessee for the national gathering, and there I met my fiancé, whom I'm proud to say I just had a baby girl with. We both have great jobs, have our adorable daughter, and it's thanks to just buying a ticket and getting out of my comfort zone. To this day, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. In short, basically, it was the best thing I've done. Met my fiancé while traveling, along with hundreds of awesome people, and saw things that I never thought I'd see. You should do it, bro. So long as you're smart about it, you won't regret it. In 2003, my wife and I decided we couldn't bear living in the US any longer. We sold everything we had except our house, a couple of suitcases of clothes, and a small laptop. We bought plane tickets. Round trips were oddly less expensive than one way, to Spain, and then promptly threw the return tickets away. We've never regretted that decision, and the chances of us ever returning, other than to visit the family members, are virtually zero. We currently have our own translation company, and even in this economic crisis, we're able to live happily and comfortably. We love this life, our family, our jobs, and prospects. We just hope that Spain and the rest of the struggling economies can find a way out of this horrendous economic mess. Written in 2013. I had that opportunity a number of times. I didn't take any of my chances, and I'm stuck here in this hellhole without that woman's unconditional love, support, or friendship. I say in the strongest possible terms, should that opportunity present itself to anyone else, do it. Even if it doesn't work out, the story alone will get you drinks or food. I regret coming back. I did too, until I realized that coming back doesn't mean you have to stay. It is true. Some people just have that wanderlust and thrive more out on the road than others, although that's less about buying a one-way ticket, I suppose. Still, if you've got that urge or you miss the feeling and have no family relying on you, maybe you can get out there again. It's not for everyone, the narrator included, but some of you crazy people seem to draw life and energy from it. Late last winter, just past the brink of 30, I'd had enough of my life. I ended an almost 5-year relationship in the fall and opened a small store, which was failing after my business partner pretty much bailed on me after his own relationship ended around the same time. New York City, my ancestral homeland, had felt like a prison as soon as I'd ended up back in it 7 years prior. I'd been dying to leave, but love and commitments had nailed me down. After finally having a talk with my business partner and him agreeing to close the store, I cried my eyes out in the back of the shop. When I could breathe again, I went to visit my best friend at her bar, where another friend of ours happened to be freshly returned from a long vacation. "You should go there," he insisted. I think it'll embrace you. He waxed rhapsodic and showed me a few photos of a place I'd never considered. Okay, I'll go. Worst case scenario, I hate it and I just pack up and go somewhere else. I'd sat still for quite long enough. 6 weeks later, I'd sold almost everything I owned, the most painful part being my books and comics. I packed whatever was left into a couple of duffel bags, had a pretty fantastic roller coaster of a going-away party, got on a bus and began a meandering road trip adventure from friend's couch to friend's couch, having an amazing time catching up with people I hadn't seen for years. And then it was 2 weeks later, 6 a.m., and I was stepping off that last bus into the still dark morning. The air hit me, thick and warm and damp and sweet. The night-blooming jasmine swept along in the faint breeze of the river, and I was home. New Orleans was the home I didn't know I was missing. I'm so in love with my life here. I'm more myself, some better, stronger, happier version of myself than I've ever been, and I'm grateful every day. I work for an artist, I make art myself, I spend time with all of these amazing friends I have, and I wander through one of the warmest, most interesting, beautiful cities I've ever known. And now I'm in a relationship unlike anything I ever thought possible. It's so fairy tale that we can't help but constantly laugh to each other about it. Regrets? Not a single damn one. At age 27, my dad had a good job, a stable relationship, born and raised in Hong Kong. Then he decided to take a vacation to Vancouver, Canada. This was back in '72, and he fell in love with the city and decided he wanted a life there. His girlfriend refused to come over, and making a life was difficult, according to him, yet he stayed. They broke up. My dad eventually tried investing in the housing market with a few friends. Lost almost all of his money, partly because Vancouver's real estate 40 years ago was nearly non-existent, and also because his friends were just blazed out of their minds half the time. He was so poor at the time and couldn't even afford a ticket back to Hong Kong. He then got extremely lucky and landed a job as a tourist guide for Chinese tourists visiting Canada, and instead of being paid, the company agrees to fly him back to Hong Kong. He worked hard for 10 to 15 years and found a wife. Does stuff with her, I pop out, and he decides he wants his family to live in Vancouver, so he comes back with us. He retires when he arrives in Vancouver in '96. I've asked him before, does he regret his decision back in '72, and he says he doesn't regret anything because in the end, everything worked out. When I was 19, I moved to Germany, all by myself. I left my parents in Brazil, haven't talked to them in a few years. In Germany, there's a test equivalent to the SATs called the AITA. You can only take it once in your life and it lasts 2 years. That's how hardcore it is. Anyway, ever since I was in the 5th grade, I wanted to take this test. I started speaking German in 3rd grade and worked my way up until I was 17, going on 18 when I started my AmITheA. It was quite tough in the beginning. I lived at home still, so my parents were still quite protective. Whenever I wanted to go out, I still depended on them, and that really irked me. I didn't have a job and couldn't get one because of the amount of schoolwork I had, so all the money came from my parents. It was really hard for me to depend so much on them because I really wanted to be independent. When I finished the AITA, I was 19. I took the first flight available to Germany, and I'll never forget that excitement I felt right when I was going to board the plane. To quote The Shawshank Redemption, it was, "the excitement only a free man can feel." I boarded the plane and felt truly amazing. I was finally going away, independent, and hoped to never have to go back to that life. Upon my arrival in Frankfurt, I instantly knew that I was in love with the country. I stayed in Frankfurt a few days and just walked around doing whatever I liked. If I wanted to, I could just stop by a store. If I wanted to, I could buy a €30 shirt. I could do whatever I pleased. I left Frankfurt, but I haven't forgotten the love I have for that city. I stayed in a small town called Haar, next to Munich. Funnily enough, the town's name means hair, and it's something that had always represented the repression I'd grown under. I'd always wanted to grow out my hair and paint it blue, so that's what I did. I started my studies in the Technical University of Munich. I wanted to become an electrical engineer. I'd always liked building things. I spent 5 years basically studying non-stop, and now I live in Hamburg. So all in all, I don't regret my decision of moving. I like being free. I like doing whatever I want. In fact, I'm so free that I wasn't even constrained by my degree when looking for a job. I'm an architect now, which doesn't really have too much in common with electrical engineering. In fact, my boss came up to me and told me he'd need help with the electrical cables we were changing in his office. He called me into it and I asked him, "Was brauchen Sie?" which basically translates to, "What do you need?" "Ich brauch Baumfidden," was his response, which means he needed tree fitty. It was then that I realized that my boss of 6 years was a 500-foot-tall reptile from the Paleozoic era? That damn Loch Ness monster had had me again. Okay, so this is the narrator editing, several hours after recording that initial piece. I stared at the script for ages. The comment is 12 years old. I don't know if the reference is something that anyone will understand, but I'm leaving it in on the off chance that it's the funniest thing in the world for one of you out there, because I sure don't get it. After watching my thriving business with 5 employees implode in late 2008, I basically said, screw it, and joined the Navy to do something radically different with my life. Now, I'm happily married to an awesome girl I would have never met otherwise. I have a new skill set. I have a job I don't like very much, but I'm out of the Navy in a few years. Thankfully, I get to keep the skill set and the wonderful wife, I hope. When I finished my time on active duty in the Army, I was 8 months pregnant. I met my daughter's father in training and spent a week with him before heading for my first duty station. In that week, I accidentally became pregnant. He convinced me to move to his hometown in Indiana so that we could try and work on things and raise our daughter. Not surprisingly, things didn't work and now I'm stuck here. He's a great dad, but here with no close family is very hard, especially since it took me years to get out and make friends of my own. So, yeah, I kind of regret it. My fiancé gave me a 2 weeks notice that I needed to pack up my crap and get ready because he was coming to get me to move me a state away. I had no money, nothing really of value to my name, and ended up shoving all of my stuff in boxes and making the fastest, most unplanned move of my life. There was no decision about it, no prior notice, just, I got us a place, get ready to go. I don't regret the decision, but it could have gone so much worse. I'd only known my fiancé for a short amount of time and had never lived away from my parents. He could have easily turned out to be some sort of serial killer and nobody would have cared, but I ended up with the best life ever. Sure, things are hard financially. I wish we'd saved up money first. I wish I could have had a hand in picking out our future little home, but I definitely don't regret the move. Not to go into too much detail, but my previous living situation was pretty horrible and he wanted to get me out of there. So he did. Gentlemen, what is the worst way an entitled admirer coped with you rejecting them? A girl at work started playing some aggressive footsie there. When I pushed her foot away and gave her a look, she went on to tell me that I'm not as attractive as I think I am and that I should start dating girls in my own league. I hate reactions like this. I don't care if I'm the ugliest guy in the world. My preferences are my own to have. If I'm not interested, then I'm not interested. Rejection sucks, but it sucks even more that people start to get personally vindictive. I know my own worth. I'd rather be alone than with someone I'm not crazy about. It's not just about me. I've hurt girls that I settled for, and I'm definitely not proud of that. As much as rejection sucks, it's better than being a placeholder until someone more suited comes along. I came home from work to find her undressed on my bed about a week after we broke up, and she went into complete denial about the breakup and for months afterward tell people we were still dating and show up at my house. I was in New York during Fleet Week, in my dress whites with my group, waiting to cross the street. Drunk girl comes up to me, grabs me, and says she's always wanted to be with a sailor. I gently stiff-arm and let her know that I'm happily married, but I point out my young single shipmate in the group. But I want you! Her friends have arrived by this point. She's told them I was being mean because I said no, and started crying. The friends confronted me. It's her birthday, though. Your wife isn't even here. Just be nice. Oof, wow. Even at my drunkest, I don't think I'd ever cross a line like that. Imagine if a woman said that to your husband someday. I dated a girl for a week when I realized she just wasn't my type and I wasn't hers, so I told her we'd go our ways. Her way, however, was to stalk me for 3 years because apparently we were meant to be together for life. The highlights were making fake internet accounts of other girls I'd dated in those 3 years, and knowing frighteningly much about me and these girls while writing to me impersonating them, calling every day, and when I changed my numbers, she'd call every other person in my life that she had the number of, trying to date people I know in my life, making weird collages of me and her on Facebook, making up fake stories of her and me, and many, many more stories. Thank God it became less and less after long, exhausting talks I had with her to make her stop, off and on again. Didn't hear from her since 2015. Oh boy, that's intense. So, I'm posting this to more or less balance out the video I made a few weeks back where the ladies got to let us have it about everything regarding man-children. And so far, I've got to say, these ladies who couldn't take no for an answer are giving the more common men who do the same thing a real contest in their disrespect for the other party's free will. So, well done there, girls. Oh wait, no, not well done. A girl in high school, out of the blue, started describing what our house would be like once we got married and had kids. I told her that I wasn't really interested, and she lost her frickin' mind. For like 2 weeks, she'd wait by the doors after school just to glare at me. She never said anything, just glared. She stalked the crap out of me, stole hair clippings, and made a shrine to me in her closet. She was a real nutcase. It's been over a year, but she still seems to find me somehow. She told everyone in the office I was gay. I have no problem with gay people, so I played along. Psst, you should have told them she turned you gay. We'd dated a couple times, and I decided that while she was nice, I wasn't interested in pursuing a long-term relationship with her. I thought it would be best to let her know face-to-face rather than over text, so we did meet up for a drink in the city. I made sure we got a booth for some privacy and told her that it'd be nice, but I didn't think taking things further was going to work. She began to cry uncontrollably and very loudly demanding to know what she'd done wrong. Even from our booth, people started looking over at us. Maybe it was unfair of me to do it in public, but honestly, we'd only gone out for dinner and drinks about 4 times by that stage, so I wasn't expecting her to react so strongly. Well, mine lied to me that she'd become preggo and intended to keep the kid. We'd always practiced safe bedroom fun time, but rubbers do have a non-zero failure rate, and there's no good way to tell someone who says they're pregnant that they're wrong. I took her at her word. After 3 days of her stalling on showing me any kind of proof beyond her word, she told me, "Oh, it's not going to be a problem." But I was beside myself with stress until then. Meanwhile, I'm figuring out if I need to lawyer up. I take responsibility for myself, so being a deadbeat wasn't an option, but child support was going to throw a huge wrench into my financial plans. I was in the middle of moving to a new city as well. All in all, it sucked. Near as I can tell, her goal was to inflict stress and pain. Mission accomplished, lady. One of my exes took it gracefully. We're great friends and it's never been mentioned again. One of them took it okay enough. Conversations got colder, but no baggage. One of them couldn't take no for an answer. Every conversation progressed to, "Do you want to?" or "Why don't you want to date me?" It got old quick. I tried being nice and letting her off easy, but she wouldn't stop. I cut her out of my life, but the last thing she told me was, "I'll wait for you. I'm not even good looking." A fellow male asked me over to his house to study. He put on some adult movie and asked if he could service me below the belt. I said no, and then he figured he'd ask if he could give me a down-under kiss. I rejected him and told my mum to come and get me. He persisted the whole time. Then at school, every time he saw me, he very loudly called me gay to everyone around him. I'm not into dudes, and he was definitely in the closet. Honestly, I just smiled and kept moving every time, and he eventually gave up. I think he came out 2 years later and was one of the 4 gay dudes in school in revolving relationships with each other. She called me a greedy Jew. I'm not even a Jew. Not rejected, but ended a relationship where she was clearly looking for something more serious than I was. She put on a smile, said she was disappointed, and we went our separate ways. I saw her a few weeks later in Starbucks and all hell broke loose. Started ripping me apart in line, crying while telling me I'm not a real man. I have not been back to that Starbucks since then. I met some friends at a bar event. Friends had a girl who was beyond drunk with them. Friends mentioned going back to their place. I decide to buy a burrito and go home. Girl says I should come with, and I respectfully decline. She demands I come. I decline again. Well, at least give me a goodnight kiss if you're not going to come with. I pass because I don't know her, I'm not remotely into her, and I don't want to know her. And she goes nuts. She's shrieking obscenities at me, trying to slap me from the railing she's against, just losing her mind. My friends are trying to calm her down, and I just pieced out through the kitchen of the place because I worked there. A girl who I just saw as a friend and had never flirted with started dropping really obvious "I'm in love with you" things in texts. I can't wait to go on a date with you, I can't wait to kiss you, stuff like that. I told her I wasn't interested that way, and she kept pushing until I told her I was dating someone. I wasn't. And she sent me a really angry text message and disappeared. She started dating someone and got engaged, so I thought I was home and free, until she messaged me the night before her wedding. Basically, she said she'd just started dating the other guy to make me realize how much I loved her and wanted me to save her from a marriage to this awful man. Her quote. I told her no. Then she said she had just swallowed a bottle of pills and wouldn't go to the hospital unless it was on the way to Vegas to elope. I called a mutual friend and told them what had happened and proceeded to block the crazy girl on everything. Turns out, wouldn't you know it, she hadn't swallowed a bottle of pills and was just being crazy. In short, she got engaged to make me realize she was my one true love and then threatened to Control-Alt-Delete if I didn't elope with her. I dated a girl from work. After a few dates, I didn't see it going much further, so I ended it. The girl pretty much spread around that we screwed at our workplace. We didn't. That single-handedly cost me any kind of promotion or horizontal move off of what I was doing, so I ended up changing jobs about 12 months later after every application for promotion was given to someone else, despite myself having a lot more experience and know-how with what we did. Prior to that, I was being moved around from project to project. After, I just went back to permanent night shifts. Said girl went on to get pregnant about 6 months later with someone else from work. The lesson? Don't dip your wick in company ink. Well, that's a story where you simultaneously got screwed in a literal and figurative sense, and then dodged a massive bullet with the same person. So it seems like you ticked every box on the possible outcome form other than mutual respect. Impressive range, really. Not me, but my best friend in school. She came on to him hard in public. There were about a dozen people around. He was startled and he turned her down. Then she started screaming, stamping her feet and crying. Then she told all of her friends that she'd commit self-deletion. They tried to guilt my friend with that, but he managed to shrug it off. The whole thing blew off in 3 days. High school was weird. I had a chick smell me all over, what the frick I know, grab me, try to dirty dance with me many times after I declined multiple times, tell me how promiscuous she was, and finally, after cupping my jewels, say, stop being a B-word, because I wouldn't F her. Weirdest frickin' person I've ever met. She later broke some stuff in the women's restroom and walked home several miles alone on foot at 4 a.m. without telling her friends. I once went on an internet double date. My friend had been internet dating this woman for a while and needed a driver to go meet her for the first time. To help convince me to drive, they arranged for one of her friends to come too. When we got to the meetup spot a few cities over, the friend just wasn't there, stuck at work. So I was forced to play third wheel, watching my friend and his girlfriend profess their love and make out. Needless to say, when that friend finally showed up, I was overjoyed. She interpreted my "thank God someone to talk to" reaction for a "oh my God, love at first sight" reaction. She got way too intense, way too quick, so I eventually let her down as easily as I could. For months afterwards, I'd get multiple emails and phone calls a day, with the craziest example being an email with our names "Together, Forever, I Love You" typed out once for every day since we'd met. She was also apparently going to my office, but luckily I wasn't there the couple of times that she did. I was on the verge of calling the cops after that stunt. Eventually, my complete lack of responses to her communication, and after blocking several of her email addresses, caused her to taper off. But I'd still get random phone calls and emails from her even years after it all happened. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Ooh, I've got one. In middle and elementary school, this weird girl took a liking to me. Followed me around at recess, wanted me to marry her when I grew up. If I wanted a recess to myself, I'd have to outrun her and lose her. She kept me in really good shape. Fast forward to high school, I landed in the same film arts class as her. I'd often be out filming interviews and short films around the school, but when I was in the editing room, there she'd be, ogling me from across the room, inching her chair closer and closer, and complimenting me on virtually everything from my hair to clothes to jewelry. I was a socially awkward teenager, and I didn't explicitly tell her no as soon as I should have. She reached out to me on Facebook a few times asking if I'd consider dating her, and that's when I said, I have no doubt you'll find the one, but it's not me. I'm pretty sure that's when the stalking started. It all started when I was biking to school one day and saw her leaning up against a telephone pole at the end of my street, staring at me as if she was expecting me. She lives quite far away from me. I used to live on her street in elementary school, so I knew. So I think she must have followed me home, then gotten up at the crack of dawn and figured out when I'd be leaving for school. This happened more than once. Fast forward to the present day, she seems to have figured out what routes I take home from work, and sometimes I'll be biking to work or home from work, and she'll be standing at an intersection, again, staring at me as if she's expecting me to come that way. She messaged me again a few weeks ago, asking if I'd date her, and I gave her a very clear rejection. Hopefully, this time it sticks. I'm just really glad she doesn't know where I live. I rejected 3 different girls in a 2-month span, and all 3 asked, "What, are you gay?" "No." "So I'm ugly?" I didn't say that. Word for word, every incident. One of them was kind of fugly, though. She cried and was wailing and asking if it was because she was ugly or her weird nose in public. I told her it wasn't and that it was me. I used to think I wasn't shallow, but her nose was Mount Everest and Uncanny Valley at the same time. She later said I slapped my member on her nose to get off. I did not have relations with that nose. Oh, this story comes courtesy of my best friend. He broke up with his psychotic girlfriend, so I went over to be supportive and I ended up calling a female friend over that I knew liked him, and I left. Around 3 a.m. he calls me to tell me his ex tried crawling through the dog door to get into his house. Somehow since then she's manipulated him into getting back with her, and she's still that psychotic. Rejected a girl that I barely knew, who then started screaming that she was going to not be alive anymore if we weren't together. I felt bad for her, but pro tip for you ladies that think this is a winning strategy, it kinda makes people want to date you less. She proceeds to get on the ground and writhe around saying she's having a panic attack and that she could die from it. I almost laugh at how fake it all is. I mean, she gently sits down during her fall and then positions herself carefully and stops moving. But a group of people come by and, quote, rescue her. We were outside a campus. She goes to hospital and obviously the doctors find there's nothing wrong with her, but she claims they just couldn't spot it. She started spreading the word on how she nearly died from the cruel mocking and verbal bullying I threw at her, and how when she was dying in the streets from a severe panic attack, I just cruelly laughed and walked away. I don't think a lot of people bought her story, but I never really saw her again, so it just kind of disappeared on its own. Oh, mine gave me the standard stuff. She spread rumors that I was gay, spread rumors that I had a tiny member, spread rumors that I had dysfunctional ding-dong. All the same woman. She still hates me over a decade later. She asked me to prom. I told her I wasn't planning on going because I wasn't interested. Told her I had to work anyway. She asked for a few days to change my work schedule so I could go. I politely declined and she understood. I was shy and didn't know how to handle an attractive 15-year-old, I was 13 at the time, coming up to me and giggling with her friend, and I thought I was just being made fun of again, so I turned her down. They broke down in tears, and for the next 3 years I was bullied by those 2 years older than me in high school. She stalked me for 19 months, tried to hit me with a car, tried to shoot me, tried to shank me, wrote my mum a letter and signed it with her blood, wrote me a letter and did the same thing, and told all my friends that I'd committed the unspeakable act on her. A few of them actually believed her, which just mystified me. On the positive side, I learned how to get a restraining order, a weapon permit, and concealed carry permit. I even learned you can then get them at the same office from people who work at desks right next to each other. Pro tip, when they ask you why you need a restraining order and a firearm permit, don't say, because if one doesn't work, the other will. They have no sense of humor in that office. Oh boy, that joke was one heck of a gamble to take when you were faced with someone who it sounds like was literally out for your blood. Good on you for maintaining a sense of humor against adversity, though. I broke up with this girl and she didn't want to. She tried to talk me out of it and then tried to commit the unspeakable act against me by pinning my hands with her knees and trying to take my pants off. Being bigger and stronger, I just stood up and dumped her on the floor. I never thought about the unspeakable act the same way after that. One time later, her other ex, my best friend, was visiting and she came over. Things seemed to be going okay when all of a sudden she leapt up in the air and tried to come down on my chest with her knees like some kind of wrestling move. I was so mad I literally threw her out my front door and told her to get the F out of my life. Turns out she was jealous of our friendship. I don't think I ever saw her again, and for the record, the stuff in the bedroom was good. You know what they say. Pulled a knife on me, like a kitchen knife, in the middle of school. I feared for my life. She swung at me a few times and gashed my cheek. Then she started slashing at herself before teachers apprehended her. She was screaming the whole time as well. And people wonder why I don't like Doki Doki Literature Club. This was a bit of a double-edged sword, but two girls in college, different times. The first one had a crush on me and her ex, and I helped her through everything. I wasn't opposed to doing the deed with her, but I never pushed for it. She made it her goal to make me feel as jealous as possible around other guys. Maybe a year later, she finally asked me to spend the night with her. I was a little baked, and after the weird bedroom activities, she passed out and started snoring. I felt weird as F laying in a bed, blazed and awake, so I decided to leave. The next day, she texted me really angrily, as expected, and ignored me for a few weeks. Maybe a month later, she posted a picture of an ultrasound and tagged me in it. Messaged me back a few hours later saying it was a joke and her mum had called her crying. That's why she told me. The second girl had BPD, but was calm and interesting enough to pursue. She asked me to go to clubs and bars with her and then made out with other guys while there, even though she said we were kind of dating. Whenever she wanted away from a particular guy, she'd come and find me and start making out with me. I still gave her the benefit of the doubt for 2 months until she straight up made me catch her with her ex. These are two girls who both want to date me and made elaborate schemes to exact some sort of revenge? ? I've stayed away from those types for years now. My ex-girlfriend broke up with me. Fine. 1 month later, I asked us to go back together and she refused. 3 months later, I found a new girlfriend. Everything was fine. A few months later, my ex goes inside my college and asks me to go back. I refused. She threw a tantrum in the middle of the students. Everyone looked at me. She basically said that I'm a son of a witch for not wanting her back. I never saw her again, luckily. We only dated for 3 months and I decided to break it off because she was really suffocating me and trying to control every aspect of my life, including that we should just go down to the courthouse and get married. Yikes. When I broke it off, all was quiet for a few hours and I was like, guess it wasn't so bad after all. But I was wrong. So wrong. She proceeded in an hour to send me about 150 texts. She said she was going to bring it. I blocked the number and then got messages on a different app and was able to block that too. Then the Facebook barrage. Hundreds of angry, threatening messages regarding me, my apartment, and my cat. Insisting I was breaking her. Going into the relationship, I told her it takes me a while to connect with people, and even so, most people aren't head over heels after 3 months. She said she was going to Control-Alt-Delete herself and that it was my fault. I called her bluff, she got really mad, and then I blocked her. She tried adding all of my family members and friends on Facebook. People started contacting me asking me if I was okay because she was posting threats on Facebook. She said she'd reveal my secrets, but she only knew some could be considered kind of embarrassing things about me that honestly anyone who knows me already knew. I had to barricade my door that night, change the locks the next day, and tell my work she was coming onto the campus. I like to stream drawing sometimes, and she found my livestream profile and spammed the chat with messages about ending things and how I ruined her life. But the glory of being a moderator for my own stream was that I could boot her. She emailed me like a year later expecting sympathy because her kids had had enough of her crap too. I still have a hard time getting myself to date again, to be honest. She cried a lot, but we're still friends. You know, we're adults. Me and this Irish chick hooked up. We had a few great nights railing each other's brains out. Come the following week, we play it off at work like nothing ever happened. About 2 weeks after that, we're effing and essing each other silly after work. I realized after a month that our 20-year age difference was going to lead us nowhere together. I broke it to her and she walked to the site parking lot and burned my pickup truck to the ground. Like, not even the aluminium rims survived that. She was arrested for arson. I laid no charges against her and got a new truck thanks to insurance. I know not all redheads are psycho, but this one sure was. What should we know about the secret lives of hotel workers? So your reviews are actually seriously listened to, like at every property that I've ever worked at except for a super crappy one. If an employee's name is mentioned negatively in an online review, that isn't necessarily grounds for a write-up, but it's definitely a fast track there. Most properties watch their online reviews like hawks. With almost any situation, unless you're speaking with a manager or someone high up the chain of command, you're a lot more likely to get what you want if you're being nice rather than rude. We're talking reasonable things, of course, like high floor with a good view, parking, food charges being removed, little things like that. You know, I really wish people understood how detailed the pay-per-view TV systems are. Oh, you want to dispute that $15 charge because you didn't even watch it? Let me see. Oh yes, you ordered Debbie Does Dallas and watched for 35 minutes the first time, and then 17 minutes the second time. I was thankful for this. I was on a business trip looking through the titles, along with notices, titles won't appear on bill. I accidentally ordered The Enron Story. I shut it off immediately, called front desk, didn't want to hand HR my hotel bill with movie rented and name withheld. For a fricking movie about Enron. The hotel took it off my bill. Look, we know you're cheating on your wife. I mean, don't get me wrong, we don't care, but don't bother making up a backstory when you're paying in cash once to twice a week in the town you live in. But that Toastmasters convention meets every week in this city, and wouldn't you know it, I always max out my credit card. I work overnight in a small-ish hotel, 430 rooms, which means that between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. I'm alone at the desk. I wish more people were considerate to the fact that when I tell you I can't run up to bring you whatever you've called down for because I'm the only person on duty and can't leave the desk, you'll need to come down and get it. I'm not just being lazy. I've got a lot of arrivals, most of them come in between 11 and 1, or someone might be at the desk checking in or asking a question or buying something from the gift shop, or there's something else ridiculous going on that I'm taking care of. This doesn't mean I'll always say no, but when I do, I'm actually busy. That Expedia takes a 25% cut. We'd much rather have you go with Booking.com, which is 15%, or even better, contact us directly. I gave up trying to call directly because not once in over a dozen times was any hotel even able to match the Booking.com rate. Apparently they'd rather lose money than compete with their own online rates. Yes, this is indeed a problem. And the front desk staff either seem unwilling or unable to do anything about it. Like, surely someone booking at a low rate is better than booking at a lower rate, and then losing 25% of that lower rate. Still, you guys are overworked, and I get it. This video is not sponsored by Expedia or Bookings.com, by the way. It's scary for us knowing how our reputation on TripAdvisor can be the life or death of us, especially to a small hostel or hotel, when a lot of the reviewers can just be drunk idiots or someone having a bad day and taking it out on the establishment. My girlfriend, who works in a relatively small place, recently got trashed in a TripAdvisor review. A customer got angry at another front desk girl. My girlfriend wasn't even on duty that night, but the reviewer didn't even know her name, so my girlfriend being the only person whose name he did know, she was the one who got crapped on in the review instead. Luckily, the manager knows this, so she didn't get in any trouble at work, but it sucks so bad that she now has a permanent record online, and everyone who reads the review and visits the hostel will instantly connect it to her since it's such a small place. You can't really ask the site or the customer to remove the review either, since it would just look like you want to compromise the integrity of the reviews. I've had myself mentioned in a few reviews, but luckily never anything slanderous, and the only bad one I've read was, "That guy never smiles," which some days I probably deserve, I guess. Look, I don't have secret rooms in the back that I keep just for high-tier guests. If I'm sold out, I'm sold out. This is something I don't understand. I get last-minute planning, but trying to find a place in town between one state and another, in a busy city, especially on a weekend or holiday, what do you expect? I'm sorry that I'm sold out, and so are the other hotels you tried. This is why you should call ahead. Being spontaneous doesn't always turn out the way you want. But it's me, I'm important. People should know that we need a credit card for incidentals before we give you the keys to a room. If we can't guarantee payment, you won't get your keys. Safety is a big concern. Walking up to me and giving your name and asking for a key to a room that is under your wife's name just isn't going to fly. I've never met you. I don't know who your wife is. There's no key for you. Don't get angry at me. Next time, put both your names on the reservation. Getting a late checkout is a privilege. Housekeeping works really hard, so we have to make sure that they leave at the time they're supposed to. I can allow some rooms to have a late checkout, but after a certain number, I do have to cut it off and respect my coworkers. First come, first served. If you have to have an early check-in because you're going to a wedding and you need to change or do your makeup or take pictures, etc., that's nice, and I'm happy to do what I can. I'm less happy if you're demanding and rude about it. It all really depends on what our occupancy was the night before and if housekeeping has cleaned a room for you. If nobody has left and you're trying to check in at 9 a.m. when checkout for last night's guests is at 11 a.m. and your guaranteed check-in time is 3 p.m., there is literally nothing I can do to help you except direct you to the lobby restrooms to change. If you need it that early, then book the room for the night before as well. And if a room's ready, of course I'll check you in. I like weddings and I want you to have fun. And I get kickbacks from the restaurant I recommended you to go to. Yes, the food is good, so it's an honest recommendation, but yeah, there's a reason I always say them. That's all I can think of for now. Maybe more later. The things I can't pull out of my butt? A clean room? My property manager? Please, if I say one or both are unavailable, please accept that as God's honest truth. Look, folks, housekeeping works their butts off. We had a high turnover one Saturday, and they asked people to come in and help strip rooms, like take all the sheets off and put them in bags with the towels to be cleaned, to make it quicker for the housekeeping to get the cleaning done. I work in conference sales and services, but I went in on my day off to help. Oh my God, I wanted to cry within an hour. I was sweaty, tired, and even with gloves, I just felt gross. My whole body was sore. We were literally doing such a small part of what housekeeping does every single day. Even as hotel employees for many years now, I truly had no idea. Tip your housekeepers, please. They work so hard. Some other things. If you're a jerk, it will be added to the comments on your reservation, and every time someone in the front desk or concierge pulls you up, they'll get a nice little warning about how you treated someone else. Anyone who has access to the rooms program, whether it's Opera or God Help You V1, can see your entire history with that resort or hotel. We get people who try to lie about their past rates all the time, and reservation tracks every time you call with notes, so when you call back to try and scam or lie to the next agent, they know. At my previous resort, I know a few people would also Google map the homes of guests who were very wealthy just to ooh and ah, or if they were jerks to find something to mock about their houses. Lots of Googling and looking up LinkedIn profiles of guests. Oh my goodness, housekeeping. I have so much respect for them. I tried it when I was just out of high school. I just couldn't get the rhythm and the time management right. Not to mention the pure physical aspect of the job. I was done within a month. It's grueling, and some people can be so disrespectful, and the staff that can do that job in a timely manner are just magicians. I always write a little thank you note and tip when I stay somewhere because of this very short experience. I ran the bell desk at a hotel on the Strip. Nobody ever goes through your belongings, ever. Guests blame the bell person because they take their items into the back room for them. Those people usually just misplace their items and blame my team member who helped them. But after looking at a surveillance video and seeing nothing out of the ordinary, that usually prompts people to take a closer look, and they usually find what they'd misplaced. And I don't suppose that a lot of these guests would let you know or apologize once you find the item that they've misplaced. I must admit that I've neglected to apologize before, and I'm not proud. I hope I'd have the strength of character to do it these days. We do not care what you're doing unless it's illegal or annoying. A lot of rules aren't set in stone in the right situation. Last week, a snowstorm caused a bunch of accidents that actually made it impossible to get to our hotel because of road closures. People who called and asked were given refunds because of the circumstances, but people who didn't call weren't. We keep extensive notes on you. Occupation, kids, anything we can use to tailor our interactions specifically to you. We also keep extensive notes on every jerk thing you've ever done. If you screamed at me or my coworker, oh, I'm writing a long note in your profile while you're still yelling at me. Then when you try to spin it in your post-stay survey, I can point my manager to the detailed and objective note I wrote about why you're a butthole. We also put in the nice things about you. I can only grant so many late checkouts without screwing over the entire housekeeping department. Ask at check-in, not 5 minutes before check-out. And don't be aghast when I tell you no. Frickin' ask for things. Is the bed too soft? We have bedboards. Is the toilet too high? We have cushions. Need a little more shampoo? We have literally thousands of them. But we don't know you need those things unless you ask us. End of rant. Hotels overbook as a policy. I guess there's a known statistic that X% of guests won't show up, and it's true 99.9% of the time. So show up to your hotel ASAP to ensure that you get your room. Also, the hotel is full of people who expect to be treated like they're the only person in the universe. If someone's taking a long time to get something done, it probably means someone stopped them. There's no reason a hotel employee is going to annoy a guest on purpose because they don't know how many days they're going to have to deal with you. Your first point is exactly why people should never book third party and always make sure you make a deposit or prepay. People who've paid already are always the first to get upgraded when their room type is oversold, and third-party reservations just tend to disappear. Sometimes they just don't come through due to system error or a fault of said third party. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. No, we do not store personal info inside of your keys. Idiots. Good God, the number of times I got asked this, or better yet, the number of times I was taught this by a guest who definitely knew our key system better than me, those same guests always refused to turn in the cards at checkout for fear of relinquishing all of their information to our team of hackers. If you give it back, I'll almost immediately wipe it and use it for another room. If you don't, great! We only have about 627,000 more cheap plastic cards in the back. If a guest service rep answers the phone while checking you in, it's not rude, it's because she or he will likely be disciplined for letting the phone ring more than 3 times. We wash the duvets every month and only wash curtains every quarter. So if someone pees on the bed, we'll clean it and then lay it out on the sun to air it out and kill the bacteria. In some states, we're required to enter your room once a week, and if you don't want housekeeping to assume your change as a tip, please don't leave it on the nightstand. Just because you're the Ultra Platinum member and requested an upgrade doesn't mean that you'll get it. We're not kicking someone else out of a room that they booked. We can't guarantee it until day of check-in. Also, we only upgrade to the next level, so if you book a queen, we'll upgrade to a king. A king, you might get a suite? But there are some room types we don't upgrade to. Expedia and similar sites are rip-offs. They charge you the same rate and they pay $20 less, but you can't cancel or get a refund. And if something goes wrong, we can't discount your room, so there's no way to make it right. If your card declines or we need you to come to the front desk for any reason, we'll lock you out but play dumb when you come to the front desk to get new keys. Also, late checkout is based on availability and only until check-in time, 3 p.m. at most places. If housekeeping will still be here, we can do it, but if housekeeping will be leaving at 1 and you want to check out at 2, we're not going to pay people to sit around for an hour waiting on you to leave. Also, if you come in a group, like a team, it's so much easier if you hand us a copy of the rooming list, instead of us asking individual people who's staying in what room. I worked for 7 years as a front desk manager and a summer in housekeeping, so if I think of anything else, I'll update. That despite night audit, the third shift, being pretty slow, I do have actual work that I need to be doing, and I'm not just sitting on my butt the whole time in between noise complaints and getting people towels or plunging their toilets when the houseman is busy. Please keep in mind that most hotels are pretty understaffed, and at 3 a.m. I'm going to be the only one here. So if you have any issues, they're going to be resolved once the GM or housekeeping or maintenance arrives much later if I can't fix them. I work in a hostel. Like mentioned above, the housekeeping does an amazing job. I wish people would realize we're not trying to make their stay miserable, we're not out to get them, we're doing whatever we can with the limited means we have. If the boiler is out of hot water because too many people shower, what exactly do you want me to do about it? We get a lot of backpackers here who are generally a bit more laid back than your typical high-end hotel guest, but even then, some can be a right pain. If I say we only have dorm rooms, then don't come to reception after having paid to complain that there's no ensuite bathroom and you don't have the room to yourself. Employees can see where you work. If you do something terrible, they could contact your employer, especially if you're using your employer's name for a special rate. One time there was a guy who stayed at our property a lot and liked to look through windows at people and otherwise be creepy. We had to call his company and let them know he wasn't welcome at our property anymore. I'm pretty sure they fired him. Housekeeping literally cleans with professional-grade black lights at my property. We can tell if you try to clean your number 2 off the walls because it glows red. And, well, there are many colors that mean many things and we know how freaky you can be. The narrator is just so very curious, but also simultaneously sure that he definitely doesn't want to know what any of this mystical rainbow of hues might be. Well, at least we know that poop is red. There's no standard way that all hotels do things. Just because another hotel does it that way doesn't mean we do. And if the staff are grumpy, it's usually because of the way management treat them. Hotels have a tendency to overwork and underpay their staff, and it's hard to appear happy when you're made to feel like a worthless piece of crap. The same goes for housekeeping. I see a lot of reviews that are like, the cleaners need to be taught how to clean properly. Trust me, they know how to clean, they just don't have enough time. They have a lot of rooms to get done and not enough time to do it. And if they can't keep up, they won't last long. Professional cleaning is a very different thing from home cleaning. If you're a jerk to a hotel employee, there's a good chance that they're going to go into the back office and talk crap about how rude you were, and the rest of the staff will groan whenever they see your name pop up on our caller ID for the rest of your stay. I only manage a small division of the front office at a large property, and I promise you that the way you treat my staff determines your whole stay. If you're extra nice to my bellman and it's your birthday, have some free champagne. If you're extra rude and it's your birthday, I'll make sure I inconvenience you any way that I can without it impacting our reviews. As a night auditor at a hotel smaller than 100 rooms, I'm the only person on the premises. My hotel isn't a full-service hotel, and unfortunately I'm required to stay at the front desk during my first few hours in case there's any stragglers checking in or someone locking themselves out. If you need extra towels, blankets, or pillows, I'm more than happy to give them to you, however I'll need you to come to the desk. I know it sucks, but we're a high-traffic area and I hate having an angry arrival who assumes I'm just sitting in the back. Plus, the owners see and hear everything, even from home. Please be advised that when you're placed on hold for a long time between the hours of 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., it's because people are checking in and I'm the only person at the desk. I have to take care of the guests in front of me before I can take calls, so hanging up and calling back to complain about being on hold for too long is not going to make me do my job any faster. In fact, I'll end up messing up more often if I'm too overwhelmed with 2 guests coming in and 3 phone calls on hold. One more thing, the breakfast hostess also works by herself even when we're sold out. If you don't like something or can't eat something, don't be rude about it. We don't know what your dietary restrictions are, and we try to serve a little bit of everything. In short, try to be understanding of the humans that work in hospitality. We really do want to make you feel welcomed, but we can't do everything. Even if it's not work-related, a lot of people do travel for business and use the same rewards number. If you use that rewards number, it shows your business. If you don't use any of that, yet still do something truly awful, they've already got your name, address, CC number. Most hotels ask for ID and CC and phone number upon arrival. They enter all of that info into their computer base. They can find you. People working at the buffet at breakfast cook with 1 microwave. I'm sorry that the eggs, sausage, and biscuits ran out right at the same time. The eggs have been cooking in the microwave for about 5 minutes, and it'll be about another 20 before everything gets refilled. Literally nothing we can do about that. Not working there anymore, thank God. Oh my God, yes. This was my first job, and while it was easy and laid back, we were given 2 tiny ovens, they were glorified microwaves, to cook everything. Also, with the area we were in with our clientele, it was about 50% Asian, and for some reason, most of them like to grab large amounts of everything, take 1 bite, and throw the rest away. Even with the ovens full at all times, we'd still run out and get screamed at. As if the nasty turkey sausage and pre-cooked eggs were worth screaming at someone over. I don't miss that job. Check-in time is pretty standard throughout the whole of the US, and just because this is Alaska, it doesn't mean I don't know you're trying to get one over on me. This will also make me give you the last room available depending on your attitude. Also, I know you don't want to listen to my welcome spiel, and I know this means you actually don't, which is why you'll call to the desk and ask many questions, all of which we answered at the very beginning. If you call the hotel directly, you get to have an easier time with your reservations. Booking through a third party might seem more convenient for you, but with the extra fees and everything, you end up paying as much or even more as if you'd booked directly through the hotel. And if you need to change anything about your reservation, the date of arrival, length of stay, you have to call them, since we can't really adjust that stuff due to contractual obligations with the third parties. And believe me when I say it can be a freaking nightmare dealing with third parties on the phone. One guy sat in the lobby, angry and annoyed, on hold with one of the third-party booking agencies for 45 minutes. You're going to get better deals if you call the hotel. The hotel gets more money out of it since we have to share whatever you pay with the booking agent, and in general it's just more convenient for everyone involved. Yes, you have to have some human interaction time on the phone, but for frick's sake, we want to sell you the room. We used to allocate the rooms for the remainder of the day and would usually upgrade our regulars, or would put the one-nighters in a slightly better room as we tended to sell the standard rooms to walk-ins. Plain and simple, if you're a jerk to me and I noticed you had been allocated a better room, I'd change that crap. Also, if you're complaining to reception about something, just tell them what you want rather than making a big frickin' deal and throwing a tantrum during checkout. If you want free breakfast or free parking or an upgrade, just say so. Oh my god, there's a lot to get off my chest, this could take a while. We don't care why you're here, you don't have to pretend that working girl is your wife, just pay for the room and go away. Most of us are very underpaid. If we say we're sold out, there's a good chance we're lying. Those email surveys you get asking how your stay was, at my property every single employee sees them, so please be nice before you say something like, the fat witch who checked me in was rude, or the gay guy at the bar made my drink too weak. It's just rude and puts you on that person's crap list for the next time you stay. Also, we know a lot about you. My hotel has very detailed profiles listing your likes, dislikes, and any problems you've had with any employees. Not just at my hotel, but any one of our properties. We color code guest reservations in our computer. Black for a problem guest, blue for celebrities, etc. And the colors will stay on your profile unless we change it. So if you were a total witch to a waitress in 2004, you're blacklisted. And you'll stay blacklisted forever most likely. So every employee you meet knows you were a witch once and acts accordingly. Managers, what's the record you have for fastest firing and why did it happen? Oh, this one was about an hour. The kid was a temp hire and we set him up at his job, showed him what to do and turned him loose. There was a can of degreaser sitting with the machine that he was operating. I came into my office and sat down, looked up and just watched him pick up a shop rag, spray a whole bunch of degreaser into it, and then he pushed it into his face and started huffing. Deeply. I sighed, got up, went over to him and said, "Come on, son," and walked him to the door. I asked the temp agency to please attempt to vet their applicants a little better in the future. I watched my supervisor fire someone on the first day. Most of the new hires are actually middle-aged women. 90% of them are awesome, but a lot of them feel super entitled because they're middle-aged. It didn't help that I was only 23 as well. Anyway, our new hire's first day of work, she seemed okay. Doesn't make too much of an effort with the kids. It's not that abnormal, I guess it takes some time to get comfortable with other people's kids. So we change diapers on a schedule here, unless they poop or obviously need a change. I've changed a couple of diapers already, and I noticed she doesn't lift a finger if the kids need a change. 10 a.m. rolls around, which is when we change every kid. So I ask her to help me. She seems surprised and goes, "Oh, I don't change diapers, honey." Yep, this lady refused to change diapers. She took a job caring for babies. She was fired maybe an hour later. Daycare workers, oh my god. My wife worked in daycare for 4 or 5 years, so I've had to listen to the stories. The amount of bullcrap that goes on is ridiculous. At least your supervisor fired them. My wife's boss would have just shrugged it off as for some reason all of her bosses were way too nice and never wanted to fire anyone. She always had some part-time teen or early 20-year-olds that were there to make some money doing nothing while going to school. Those kids never contributed and never got fired either. I managed a gas station for a while. I hired this guy who seemed completely normal, which was hard to come by, so I had him start the next day. After about 30 minutes of working, he says he needs a break. No big deal, something must have come up. Maybe 10 minutes later, a customer came in saying that there was a guy passed out in the men's restroom. I sent another guy working into the restroom, and the guy that I'd just hired was undressed and completely unresponsive. The paramedics came and turns out he had taken way too much smack. He had survived, but I still never got an answer on why he was undressed. Hired a kid to work opening shifts at a local pool. We were short-staffed, so he was learning the ropes with me on a 5 a.m. shift. As we opened, he asked if he could take a quick cup of coffee. I agreed, asking him to make me one. Around 5 minutes later, a swimmer comes up to me and said she saw my lifeguard snorting something. I was obviously angry and went to see what was going down. I went up to the window and saw him doing another line. After a short argument, he finally decided to just leave and not make me substance test him. Lasted a whole 10 minutes of us being open. Oh boy, what do you even tell your parents you got fired for? And I have to hope that kid meant at least in his mid to late teens if he was using substances, oh god. Although someone that age needing coffee is also a bit of a mind screw for me. Dude got hired as a waiter, and halfway into his first shift, he was falling down drunk. I pulled him into the kitchen and said, "Dude, you're fired." Not that I was firing him, just an observation. I was a little taken aback and not really thinking about what I was saying. The owner heard me and reprimanded me, "You don't have the authority to fire anyone," and then immediately fired the guy. She didn't even make it through the office tour. We hire a lot of seasonal workers, and last year we had a girl with one of the legit small particles of peanut dust will kill her dead peanut allergies. So we put up a few reminder signs, had some peanut-free dishes and forks in the kitchen, that kind of stuff. This new girl started a few weeks after the rest of the group, and when I was showing her around, she pointed to the signs and asked sarcastically if we were serious. She looked genuinely surprised when I said they were real serious, and then smirked and said, "You actually believe someone can die from peanuts?" And followed it up with the usual things like, "Stuff like that isn't real. You'll see." I asked a few questions to make sure she wasn't trying to make a terrible joke, and then went full manager speak and asked if she'd be able to follow the rules to keep her coworkers safe. And when it was obvious she was serious, I told her she was done for the day and she could head home. I didn't actually have hiring and firing powers, so I was a little worried when I took it to our boss. If she denied it, it would be her word against mine. Fortunately, when my boss took her aside to ask what happened, she replied, "Oh, they were getting all weird about someone who was pretending to have one of those fake peanut allergies." From what I hear, she was completely, genuinely shocked when she was fired. I had a bartender who lost money her first shift by herself. The draw started with $200, came back with $140. She had worked 6 hours and didn't have many credit card tips or anything, so she somehow managed to spend all of her tips and $60 without leaving the building. Yeah, fired. One week I got a call from the county jail because this girl I'd just hired had been arrested, and she refused to give any info to the police except for the fact that she'd worked for this particular store. They called me, trying to figure out her info and a person to contact about her arrest. I told them I couldn't give that info out, but I would call her emergency contact to let them know that she was in jail. I called this girl's emergency contact, who was her mother, and told the mum that her daughter was currently sitting in the slammer. All the mother said was, "Figures," and she hung up on me. After she was released from jail, about 2 days later she ended up in the hospital from alcohol poisoning. So yeah, I had to let her go. The worst part was that I actually liked her. Wide open call center desk farm. The dude on his first day fires up the naughty movies on his PC with sound. Bold move. I worked in IT in the early 2000s. One day there was an MP3 being emailed around offices. It started out real quiet, and I think it was a comedian telling a joke. The email basically said, "This is hilarious, but you need to turn it up to hear it." After about 20 or 30 seconds, it suddenly yelled, "Hey everybody, I'm watching smut over here!" and a bunch of noises from a couple having very naughty whoopee. When I was out at some restaurant for lunch that day, I heard at least 3 tables talking about someone who fell for it. It wasn't much of an interview. He had the right skills, and I needed someone with those skills the next day on the job. So anyway, he shows up late on his first day, then proceeds to make offensive and racist remarks to coworkers and the clients. 2 hours. He was good at his actual job, but I wasn't going to submit my employees and especially my clients to that bullcrap. Ooh, he was on something and out of his head. Screamed at me to stop yelling at him. I wasn't speaking. I had to let some poor kid go after 30 minutes. He didn't want to quit because it was his first job, and he bought scrubs entirely for this occasion, but he was clearly in over his head the second he started his orientation. To my own credit, he interviewed like a champ, and some people are just really good at saying all the right things. I asked if he'd feel better if he was fired, my intention being to remind him the fired is a bad thing, so if he doesn't think he can hang, he should quit on his own terms. He said yes, so I fired him. He shook my hand and told me I had nice eyebrows, and he left. The next day he emailed me to let me know he was quitting. I told him there were no hard feelings since he was already fired. I've now learned to ask every phlebotomist applicant if they're comfortable being exposed to blood. Fricking thanks, Connor. I mean, I'm a pharmacy technician and you'd be amazed at the number of job applicants surprised that you have to pass a substance test. Sure, I could test the substances. What substances do you need me to test? There was this one employee I'd given a warning about not pulling his weight at 8:45 a.m. At 9:30, my team informs me that he just announced in their 9 o'clock meeting that he's taking a week-long vacation, starting the next day. 9:35, he's nowhere to be found when I'm looking for him to see if they misheard about the impromptu vacation that he failed to run by me. He shows back up at 10 o'clock, confirms he decided he needed a vacation while in the 9 o'clock meeting. I hope it was a nice vacation because he lost his job over it. Not me, but I had a friend who supervised a movie theater. They hire this kid. First day, first showing of that day, he lets 20 people in and follows them in himself. He thought no one would notice that he and his friends were partying while watching a movie that he'd closed the sales to so that they'd have the rooms to themselves. She showed up on her first day strung out on something. She was really angry when I sent her home and told me I was going to make her lose her children since the judges said she had to have this job. Complete BS since she was hired for the holidays. It didn't stop me from being scared for the next few weeks. That woman looked like she wanted to hurt me. A former coworker of mine was fired from our inbound customer service rep job during our second on-the-phone shift because he shouted at a customer, My God, are you fricking stupid? He says he forgot to hit mute. Look, I'm going to say in this person's defense, I do get it. I'm on your side for wanting to shout that when you're working in customer service, but I do also understand why you got fired, and hopefully, so do you. Hired this big Michael Clark Duncan-looking guy who claimed he had experience in a kitchen, had some higher-end stuff on his resume, and talked the talk well. Nobody could get a hold of his references, but we were short-staffed and needed a body, and he'd interviewed really well. So, cut to his first day. The man had no clue at all on any of the big kitchen basics, and we started questioning our decision. But we figure maybe he's nervous or hungover, it is a kitchen after all, so we let it ride another day. Day 2, he comes in and starts prepping. I'm keeping half an eye on him. I see him grab some potatoes for soup. The next thing you know, he mutters about the chef's knife being dull, and instead of sharpening it with the whetstone on hand, or even using a steel, he grabs a 10-inch flexible boning knife and starts wobbling and forcing his way through a large russet. It's not going well. I pipe up, "Hey, that's the wrong tool for the job. What the hell are you doing?" He says, "Nah, man, I got this." As I try protesting again to tell him, "No, seriously, you're going to bleed," I see the potato roll out of his grip and the knife spring off the side of it and sink itself into his left hand and out the backside of the same hand. I'd never seen a black dude go pale before that day, but he sure did. I then proceeded to tell him we were going to go to the hospital, to leave it in and I'll grab the towel. The guy, naturally, yanks the blade out of his hand and covers my prep table, slicer, and wall with blood in the process. I handed him the towel, he wraps up and tells me he's good to drive to the hospital and would be back as soon as he could. I told him he didn't need to come back until the next day to pick up his paycheck. He freaks out and I have to call him on his BS and list about a dozen unsafe or unhygienic practices that are enough to cause me to let him go, let alone the fact that he just stuck a knife through his frickin' hand after being told not to use it. You can lie your way into a lot of jobs, but you can't lie your way into a kitchen. In short, I fired a guy on his second day for ramming a boning knife through his hand like a dummy, after trying to cut potatoes with it and being told that it was the wrong tool for the job. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had to tell someone on their first day of a tech support training class to click on the big blue E. She was gone at lunch break. One guy that got hired at the same time as me at the movie theater got fired the next day. He'd stand around in the halls, and when it was time to clean a theater, he'd disappear and hide in a bathroom to avoid working. This guy grabs a candy bar, opened it, and started eating it while waiting for the interview. Manager noticed and asked the guy if he paid for it. He said no, and the manager told him to pay and then to F off. My job recently hired a woman to work at our restaurant, and she got fired within 2 days due to her inappropriate advances on other staff members. We believe she had some form of nymphomania and have now changed our interviewing procedures. She'd go up to the desk and smack the receptionist's butt. The receptionist grabbed her hand and cussed her out the third time she tried doing it. She was being trained by our male manager, and she placed his hand on top of her crotch and kept telling him, "My mother lives down the street. We can just hang out there, babe." Yes, she called him babe. Oh, we can go there really quick. We could all go. She was pushing her chest onto him and intentionally bumping into him. She also hit on every single customer. I'm a manager at a restaurant. A new hire, a young adult male, was berating a female long-time employee about how her use of birth control indicated that she was a big old promiscuous working girl. I had to explain to him how inappropriate that was on so many levels, and then can him. Also, this doesn't really fall into firing quickly, but it's amazing how many people can show up to orientation without the proper identification, so you can't even start them. Not fired, but we didn't hire a lady because during her interview we asked, "Describe a difficult situation at work and how you overcame it," and she replied, "During my divorce, I didn't want to talk to my ex, and I told my oldest child they'd be the ones arranging visits with their father, and my daughter said she didn't want to have to do that, so I sent her to live with her dad instead. It was really hard, but I ended up making the right choice." Nope, didn't hire her. 5 days. We hired this server who'd been waiting tables her whole life and was GM of a restaurant for about 10 years at one point. She was the typical alcoholic white trash lady with stringy hair and baggy sweaters and smelled like stale smoke. Anyways, she somehow makes it through training, barely, and shows up for her first shift late and hammered. She walks into the back booth and proceeded to pass the F out. A different manager tried stirring her awake, then poking and shaking her a little. Nothing worked. Finally, he just roared her name and she woke up and he told her to leave and they'd mail her a check. She was just tottering away, yelling obscenities and flipping everybody off. This is the story of how a couple of people I hired got fired super fast. One guy asked for a multiple-choice menu test and was serious. The other one, on her second or third shift, she was arrested in the middle of the dining room by her probation officers. I was fired after one day because I wouldn't upsell a fancy grilled cheese to a 90-year-old lady. Two different ones. I run a car dealership. I hired a young guy who was maybe 22. He was waiting around after getting hired to get his passwords and was out with the other salesman. A man walks in with his teen daughter and the guy starts loudly talking about the things he would like to do with her in the bedroom. The dad hears and is brought to me. I walked out and fired this new guy. That one was 20 minutes after being hired. The second fire was a guy I'd hired to be a salesman and I asked him if he had a record. He said no and was fired 4 hours later for having a grand theft auto charge. I managed a fast food restaurant and hired someone to work primarily in the back prep kitchen. The job involved cutting 5 to 10 20-kilo bags of potatoes per shift with a hand-operated machine, dishes, and cleaning. He had a great trial shift. I scheduled him on for the next day at 12. I arrive at 3 for the closing shift to find dishes piled high, enough cut potatoes for maybe the next half-hour maximum, should be enough for the whole night by the way, and this guy was just sat in my damn office chair texting. Nope, bye-bye. 3 hours from start to finish, 15 minutes from when I walked in. Well, at least this guy wasn't like that other story we had about chopping potatoes. I'll take the lazy guy over the one who lies on his resume and makes the world's most unorthodox kebab with his own hand. Back in the 80s, I managed a retail clothing store in the mall. We hired a guy to carry heavy boxes for shipping out to the back, and to do basic chores and cleanup. First day on the job, 10 minutes after he'd clocked in and was supposed to be loading boxes into the pickup area for UPS, I walked into the dressing room and I found him looking over into one of the stalls watching the teenage girls changing clothes. It was the 80s, so all he got was fired. Today, I guess he'd have been arrested. A temp we hired for a project interviewed pretty well. Well-dressed, a bit on the svelte side, spoke perfect English with the barest hint of a London accent, looked you in the eye, had a ton of credentials. If anything, he seemed a bit overqualified for what was essentially a grunt lab position. Did well with a bunch of managers. First day of work, he went to orientation. I got a call from someone who worked in that building and said my new temp was a real piece of work. Sat in the conference room, slipped his shoes off, and propped his cracked feet on the chairs in front of him. Okay. He also bought a huge, sloppy, highly spiced pastrami grinder and left a mess behind. He slapped the butt of someone over there. She reported it, but I didn't hear about that officially from HR until day 3. On day 2, he showed up to the computer lab. He was a completely different person from the interview. I mean, like a different human. He was squat, overweight, different face and hair, had a thick accent. I didn't know who he was, but he wasn't the guy we hired. The only similarity was his ethnicity. But he was completely not the same person. This guy was gross and completely inept. We went over his resume and I got a copy of his ID. He wasn't even a US citizen. I'd never come across this before. The temp company pulled a bait and switch. On day 3, he was 2 hours late, but by that point I had the permission to fire him based on his lack of being a US citizen. We later found out that his temp agency would send the nice guy in for the interview and then send someone of the similar race to the job with the same name, and they'd gotten away with it for quite some time. But usually the guy they sent wasn't this poor quality, so sadly it went unnoticed until now. Within the first 3 hours, when I was a manager at McDonald's, we'd sometimes get employees coming in for the local inmate work release programs. Lots of felons and other undesirables. This particular one was old. I'm talking 50 or 60. On people's first days, we usually put them on the front register so they familiarize themselves with the menu and whatnot. After sending everyone on break, I take my break and come back to see the man fishing out the dollar bills from the Ronald McDonald House Fund thing with coffee stir straws, with customers waiting in line to have their orders taken just watching him. My very first managerial job was as the loss prevention manager for a fairly large department store. The first person I ever hired for loss prevention ended up stealing from us the first night she closed alone. I figured it out the next day and set up a trap for her the second time she closed alone. My regional manager and another loss prevention manager and I set up hidden cameras and pretty much hid in the store the whole day to catch her stealing after closing time. I worked at the boarding kennel for a few years and I really loved it. It's hard, loud, dirty work, but I like animals and dogs are the best people. We also boarded exotics, which was neat as heck. Anyway, the boss hires on this girl that seemed a little off. During training, she'd stare off into space and not really acknowledge me. But when I walked her through the process of feeding and cleaning kennels, she did it just fine, so I set her on her way. Her first real day of work, she went out to clean the kennels, scoop poop and wet bedding and replace it. This is a long process. It takes 2 hours if you really know the work. Well, 6 hours into her shift, nobody had seen her. So I went hunting, and easily half of the kennels aren't done and a lot of the doors are open. For the dog's safety, you just don't do that. Now, I can't find the girl or 4 of the dogs. I run to the boss because I genuinely thought this girl had stolen someone's pets, and the whole team goes looking for her. We knew the boss had found her because she's a screamer. This girl has got these 4 big dogs, a Malamute, a Great Dane, and 2 Shepherds, all on leashes, tied to the fence, and she's giving them baths in the owner's horse trough. We don't groom, and she's bought the shampoo from home in her lunchbox. She didn't understand why the boss was mad. It's so hot and they look so unhappy. Look at how happy the other 10 I already did are. The boss literally dragged her to her car, kicking and screaming because apparently we mistreat your dogs. So yeah, 6 hours. Teachers, what's the biggest red flag of any kind you've seen from a student? I was giving a spelling test to my 3rd graders, and one student calmly got out her glue and poured it into her ear. Oh, that sounds like a reasonable response to me. I'm sure she just wanted to block out noise in order to focus on the test. Oh, I had managed to push this other student out of my brain. So let's call him Brian. Brian was a 6th grader. Brian was, on first glance, a classic case of look at me disease. He constantly needed to be the center of attention, he needed to be liked, but he was also very sensitive. He'd been in my class about 2 weeks when he first broke down crying during a lesson. I pulled him aside to talk privately and asked him what was the matter. Mr. Bones, these other kids just don't understand. I'm not trying to be annoying. I've had a hard life, and everyone's just making fun of me without knowing what I've been through. He said all of this through big wet tears. I really felt for the kid and tried to make him feel better. He continued, when I was in 1st grade, I saw my younger sister get unalived by a drive-by. It happened right in front of me. It was so awful. And then just full-body heaving sobs. This was literally in my 1st month of teaching. I wasn't prepared for this, but I tried to do my best for the kid. I had someone from the office come and get him, and in my free period following the class, I called his mother. The way she responded with such nonchalance chilled me to the bone. Mr. Bones, my son Brian lies like a rug. He's an only child, and he's only ever been an only child. So I'm thinking to myself, wait, what the frick? But what about these tears, I asked her. She said, when my son was 2 years old, he'd sit in front of the mirror and make himself cry. He'd practice it over and over, and I'd tell him to stop it because he was scaring me. I just didn't even know how to respond to that. I can't even remember how we wrapped up the conversation. The next day, Brian starts crying in class. I pulled him out and told him about the conversation I'd had with his mother. He raised his head up, his face stained with tears, and he had the biggest smile on his face as if you just told him we were going to stop at McDonald's on the way home. Not elated, not benign, just pure waxy-faced nightmare fuel. Since that day, I pegged him to become one of those kinds of serial killers who burns through a ton of different identities. I actually came across some social media posts years after the fact. He's a substance dealer now, so I guess that's better than being a face-eating murderer. That is indeed better than cannibal, serial unaliver, correct. However, I find it hard to believe that someone with that particular sociopathic tendency to lying and manipulating won't have made a lot of people unhappy in some other way. Without treatment, of course, nobody's truly without hope. The author has left another dose of mini-stories and factoids about our dear Brian. Brian cried maybe once more in my class after that day, but he seemed to realize that I wasn't going to fall for it. I do believe him to have been a sociopath, not a psychopath. It wouldn't surprise me if he was still a sociopath. This was easily the most manipulative kid I've ever taught. In spite of his mother's comments to me, he still had her fooled most of the time when he got in trouble. She often claimed that Brian's teachers had it out for him. Yes, he might also be a face-eating murderer as well as a dealer. I concede that I can't know for sure. Yes, he probably would have made a great actor. We didn't have a drama department or class in our middle school. I was working in the inner city at a school that was falling apart literally and figuratively. No, my real name is not in fact Mr. Bones. Lots of parents don't get their kids the help they need for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's because they're crappy parents. Sometimes they work crazy hours to raise a kid or several kids on their own and they get overwhelmed. Sometimes they're in denial. I can't really say what Brian's mum's case was. She meant well, but I think it was easier for her to not confront the path her son was going down, hence the whole dealer thing. I won't reveal exactly where it worked, but it was name-checked in California Love by Tupac. A few people have called this fake and called me a lying CUCK. I taught several years ago for a short period of time. Average burnout time for teachers is 3 years, so be kind to your kids' educators. They see your kids more than you see them. No, I'm not Brian, and he's not wearing my face and using my login info. I haven't seen Split, but I'm pretty sure Brian wasn't in it. He's too busy running that trap house. And not all Brians are evil, just the ones who replied to me to tell me that not all Brians are evil. Hashtag not all Brians. I teach middle school math. We have a Saturday school once a month for students with failing grades to get extra help in whatever subject. One kid didn't want to be there and was placed in a conference room in the office so that he didn't disturb the other kids. So this kid pulled out a tooth, an adult tooth. He pulled it out of his face and it was terrible. The best part was that I had to run to grab some copies from the area he was in and checked in on him. Smiling, gap in teeth, he tells me, "Hey, my tooth fell out." This is honestly the worst thing I've read all day. I remember a kid in 5th grade that would crap in his pants, reach down there, pull some out, roll up little dookie balls and throw them at the other kids, all while laughing like he was having the time of his life. That's gotta be some kind of red flag. I'm not a teacher, by the way, but I saw the question and instantly thought of this kid. I was in the 5th grade in 1980. The protocol for handling this kind of behavior in children is probably different now. I really hope he got some help. This was a long time ago. I'm not a teacher, but I was doing co-op placement as an educational assistant when studying sociology. We're talking like 15 years ago, give or take. Had a student in the class, with behavioral problems, mind you, walk up to another teacher who was pregnant and proceed to tell her that he was going to cut it out of her. Nobody really knew how to react, and the tone in his voice and look in his eyes was up there with the most evil thing I've seen up till that point in my life. He had severe behavioral problems related to his disability. He was sent home and kept at home for a number of weeks, but was eventually allowed back in class. This was an experimental program, which no longer exists, at this one high school for rather severe behavioral issues, so the rules were bent quite a bit while I was there. He was actually a rather pleasant kid more often than not, but when he had one of his bad days, he was one of the worst in respects to violence and threats. There was a kid in my brother's 5th grade class who tattooed himself with pen ink. It worked, and he was forced to wear sleeves when he played on the middle school basketball team so that they didn't show. He is now in prison. I should clarify that doing a few dots or a little smiley face isn't a big deal. People do that all the time and turn out all right. This kid did his entire arm down to the elbow. I subbed for this 6th grade teacher a lot. She had this student who seemed like a harmless but obviously mentally and physically disabled kid. Whenever I saw him, he was calm, drooled, and carried an iPad so that he could semi-communicate. He didn't seem 100% there at any given time, but like I said, he seemed harmless. Halfway through the school year, the teacher that I subbed for decided that I should now probably know to steer clear of this kid if he gets any sort of mood other than calm. Like if he's upset that it's cloudy, then I can't talk to him. He also had an adult that followed him everywhere. I assumed this guy was a para, the people that help IEP or independent education plan kids. But no, he was a legit handler for this kid. It took me a while to dig this kid's backstory up, but apparently this kid had to be medicated to high heaven just to be at school, hence the drooling and super passive behavior 99% of the time. Apparently he was ultra crazy aggressive, and if he got into any bad mood, it meant that his meds were wearing off and he was a ticking time bomb. His meltdowns caused school lockdowns because of how violent he was towards himself and others. There was actually a literal designated plan for this kid if he snapped, hence the handler. I felt really bad for him because of his medicated out life and the fact that he probably has some incurable rage issue or brain problem. But sweet Jesus, the kid terrifies me now that I know. I just wanted to say that this was in a rich suburban school district where they have a tendency to rug sweep really bad IEP kids until high school. There aren't any good private or alternative schools nearby for IEP kids. Pretty much all the other schools are private Catholic schools with 0 special education departments. Once the kids get to high school, the school generally recommends either online school or the nearby alternative high school that specializes in special ed. I don't think that we can really say that this kid was waving any red flags himself. It's just kind of seeming like a problem that no one knew how to deal with, and he was the biggest victim of this condition. I don't know if more therapy or treatment could have helped him, but my God, it's just so sad. Mum taught for more than 30 years. About 10 of them were in a self-contained classroom. So if the kids didn't succeed in this self-contained unit, they were expelled entirely. So basically she got the worst of the worst. She loved the kids, and over that time she only had 2 that truly frightened her. The common thread was that they had no emotions whatsoever. They were never happy, never sad, never jealous, and never vengeful even. It was just nothing. At least the kids who were angry, frustrated, apathetic, or silly were feeling something. Of those 2 kids, one is now in jail for a long, long time, and she doesn't know what became of the other one. One year I had a female student in middle school whose arms were really just a bunch of bloody, scabby cuts. She hid it really well at school as it was winter and the students were all wearing sweaters. We only found out because one of her friends started crying and told me I needed to talk to her immediately. I used to have a kid in my class that enjoyed hurting others, laughing right after throwing something at a student, and laughing harder at them being affected by said action. I was in charge of an after-school program for junior high and high school students aged 13 through 18. One time I was waiting for a 13-year-old girl to get picked up from her friends, and this was the conversation I heard across the room while they were messing with the whiteboard. Girl number 1 drew the symbol of the Third Reich. Girl number 2 said, "You can't do that, that's bad." "Why?" said the first girl. "I don't know, it's just bad." Girl number 1 then says, "Oh, it's okay, my dad has it tattooed on his chest." I didn't really know what to say at that point. I should add that I was working in a semi-rural part of the US, and the dad was a white guy who lived in a trailer park. I'm not one for stereotypes, but I'm pretty sure the guy wasn't Hindu or Buddhist. But I do appreciate that so many people tried to look for a silver lining in it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Wife is a teacher. 8th grader would smear his own number 2 on the restroom walls. Threatened to commit the unspeakable act on my wife in the comments section on her classroom YouTube channel, which was a rookie mistake using your real name as your username. When we called out for it, parents lawyered up and said that no one could ever prove his account wasn't hacked, so he had no way of knowing it was him. Later, my wife found a note near her classroom door in his handwriting saying that he was going to go on a rampage in the school and that he already knew where everyone was going to hide. The school went on lockdown and he was later found hiding in the woods behind the soccer fields. When questioned about it, he said he ran because he was scared. I could go on. That kid will likely go on a rampage in his high school. Oh, the worst? I guess I had a student with claw marks over her eyes. Like legit looked like someone had scratched her eyelid. The whole upper area right under her eyebrow was scarred and it was like too small to have been an animal. Me and a coworker asked about it. She started getting defensive, and once a kid starts stammering and making excuses, you've got to make the call to CPS. I got fired for making the call. Apparently I hurt the school's standing in the neighborhood because I snitched, and the kid got removed from her family and sent to another state. Another kid had trouble staying up in class. Turned out his house was at the center of a substance bust later that year. God, that was a fun time. I teach in an area that's been very, very affected by the opioid epidemic. I taught a student who was well known to be addicted to smack. He was also the person who gave his mother her first dose of it. Sadly, his mother eventually succumbed to taking too much of it herself. The last time I saw him, he had self-tattooed on his arm, "I killed my mum," in huge letters. My mum is a special education teacher, mostly kids with autism and learning disorders, middle school-aged kind of thing. But her program had gotten students who don't fit into regular classes, so they get dumped into her program. One of the students, about 6 or 7 years back, was super weird. He was mouthy, hated authority, and was a lot bigger than the other kids. He wrote, "I'm going to R-word Miss Teacher" in bright red Sharpie on a paper that he had to pass in to another teacher. They called his parents into the school to talk about it, and the student's mum started laughing. She said that her child had a weird sense of humor, but he means no harm to anyone. She also had another student whose parents had him miss school on December 21st, 2012, because the world could end and they couldn't expect him to spend his final day in school. There's a kid in this preschool class, aged 5, that says the most off-the-wall stuff. So far this school year, she said that her dad is going to come to the school and attack people and their families, that she has a doll that will come to this other little girl's house and go full Annabelle on her butt, and finally that her dad shoots kittens. At this point, I'm thinking of calling CPS or at least pushing the issue with the school district because there's no reasonable explanation as to why a 5-year-old would be saying these disturbing things. I'm not a teacher, but I had a kid in the 2nd grade with me try to take my eye out with a pencil. Multiple times. He was obsessed and had to be taken out of class and dealt with on several occasions. Never anyone else, just me. And his reasoning? He looked me in the eye and said, "You did the same to me in my past life." The stoic and tense look on his face when he said that still gives me chills. My cousin, currently in 1st grade, had a girl in his class throw a computer tower in their classroom and slapped and punched the teacher as she tried to gain control. To my knowledge, nothing ever happened to the girl because the teacher and the girl's mother are good friends. They don't want to ruin her time at school by reporting the incident. My mum used to teach in a boys' secondary school. This one kid was generally a jerk, violent, rude, and provocative. One day, the deputy head dropped down dead of a heart attack in front of some of the kids at break time. Less than 10 minutes later, this particular kid was imitating the teacher dying in front of the others and laughing for their entertainment. Not in the least fazed by what he'd seen and had no idea that what he was doing was horrifying. And just to clarify, this kid was in year 10, so he was 14 or 15. This was not an awkward way to deal with what he'd experienced, he just thought it was funny. The teacher's wife worked at the school, and when she came back after the funeral, he did his little impression for her too. Oh boy, yeah, fairly safe to say that that was not cool, to say the least. I mean, there are some kids who have a weirdly removed attitude to death or aren't very good at processing it for any number of reasons, but you know him better than any of us people on the internet and seem to have a prior history with him, so I guess we'll take your word for it. I had a classmate who really wanted to hurt the others for fun. If there was blood, he'd celebrate it no matter if he was expelled. A real follower of Korn. Blood for the blood god. Student skipped the week or two that he had pool time at PE, cancelled his parents at conferences, and he was exhibiting some gang tendencies. Oddly, so were the parents. I found out later that year he'd skipped pool PE class because he'd had his last name tattooed across his back in Old English. This was a 14-year-old. My mum has taught kids for nearly 40 years. The only one that ever truly scared her was a kid that used to act like he was sucking up until he thought she wasn't paying attention. Case in point was when she gave everyone a Christmas gift before break. He fawned over how great the gift was and that he was going to cherish it forever. The second he thought she wasn't looking, he threw it in the garbage. He was 9. As a side note, I worked with him at a telemarketing place in high school. I remember when he told me that he'd been diagnosed as a sociopath. He was eating an ice cream cone while explaining it to me and said, "Basically, a sociopath means I'd feel the same way eating this ice cream as I would killing a dog." Ugh. The fact that he explained his diagnosis so clearly and understandably is very interesting to me. I had a kid who would pinch and slap someone else with an infection around his mouth purely to see them in pain. When he lost his crap, she didn't flinch, showed no remorse, and was scarily intelligent. I think there might be some issues there. Also, a kid putting a Stanley knife to someone's neck and laughing as they tried to free themselves. It was my first and only year of teaching. I had a student earlier this year who came to me because he was, quote, kicked out of his last school, according to him. He was covered in tattoos as a freshman in high school. On the second day of having him in class, I looked up from my desk while students were supposed to be taking a test to see him miming cutting off my head with something shiny. When I went back to see what it was, he laughed and hid it, swearing that he had nothing. I looked up to see him doing it again. Same thing happened, I let it go. After he left the room, I found the pen he'd been writing with under his desk with 2 small incisions in the cap. I immediately reported it to admin. The incisions on the pen indicated that he was using some kind of sharp object, a thumbtack I suspect, to mime cutting my head off. And yes, we documented and reported these things every step of the way. He was moved to another teacher a few days later for an unrelated scheduling issue. He threatened to kill her. He was moved to another teacher because of that, and in this third teacher's class, he drew pictures of rifles all over his essays. So many red flags. He was eventually sent to the alternative school a few months later, but he'll likely be back. I'm a college professor. A guy a little bit older than me wrote a paper in which he shared a fantasy about beating the crap out of a younger female therapist for not listening to him about his problems. He was constantly distracting in class, cheated in every way imaginable, and just struck me as off. I repeatedly put in student of concern notices about him because I really thought that something was going to go wrong. Shortly after the class ended, he took his newborn kid and ran away to a different state. You know, I might have set off a red flag for teachers when I was in 3rd grade. I'd always pull my pants all the way down to my ankles when I peed at the urinal, and obviously I'd get constantly made fun of for it. Well, it got very tiring and hurtful, so one day when I dropped my drawers to pee, the boy that walked up in the urinal besides me, like seriously, who walks up to pee side by side with someone anyway? He started running his mouth off and I just nonchalantly pivoted and peed all up and down his leg. The principal called my mum, and I was tactfully talked to at home about how it's good to stand up for yourself, but that wasn't an appropriate way. Then my dad took over and explained how I really needed to basically not get completely undressed to pee standing up at a urinal. Oh god, you've reminded me. I used to pull my pants all the way down and it started to draw attention. I was in 1st or 2nd grade. One day, this kind of rough kid came into the bathroom while I was peeing. I thought he was going to mock me or kick my butt, but he casually told me that I should really just use my zipper, and made it sound easy. He walked me through it. It was incredibly sweet and merciful, and from that day forward, I used my fly. Real talk though, I think there's such a long stretch of ages where boys learn that pants all the way down isn't in fact cool, and most of us had at least one heartbreaking encounter where we realized we were doing it differently. I taught 2nd grade for a bit, and one time I had a child come from a behavioral class because he scored high on a lot of tests. He was big for an 8-year-old, had no spatial awareness, and would accidentally hurt the other students. One time he celebrated and flung his arms out and clotheslined one of my students, dropping her to the floor and giving her a nasty gash and bloody nose. There was a lot of blood. Now, I said he was from a behavioral class, so he was really smart but lacking in terms of maturity and other things. He constantly shoved his hands down his pants and would pick his butt and sniff it in public. I'd always call him out on it and he'd stop immediately. He'd also throw big fits if I took recess time away from him for no homework or for misbehaving. This one day we had a lockdown drill. During a lockdown, no one's supposed to make a sound, and it's extremely serious. He fooled around the whole time and was giggling and talking. I was very upset with him, so after it ended, I revoked his recess completely. He went ballistic and lost his crap. He picked up his desk and launched it across the room and started screaming, and grabbed a pencil and tried to jab himself hard in the stomach with it. I managed to restrain him while an aide took the pencil and then took him outside the hall to calm him down. That didn't really work out as he kept becoming more violent. Eventually, he was sent home. The rest of the class was pretty mortified and afraid of him. There was a chunk of desk that flew off from how hard he threw it. An 8-year-old. I'm also a male teacher at about 175 pounds, and I work out pretty frequently, and I could feel how strong he really was when I restrained him. That kid was intense. About a month after that, he started making really great progress, and his grades kept improving, along with his behavior. But I honestly was so wary of him for the rest of the year, waiting for something to go down again. Do fast food workers ever sabotage meals when their customers behave like jerks? At an old pizza place I worked at, we all found out that our boss took some of our tip money from the jar for himself. That week, everyone who came in got extra free food. A dozen wings, you say? Here, have 30. Add 5 ranches to dip in. And no, the boss didn't wonder why he was suddenly getting so many praises from customers. Who are you kidding? We delivered lazily prepared, subpar pizza and fried foods to people who were blazed out of their minds and white trash. When I worked at McDonald's, I'd make the sandwiches look like the pictures if people were rude. This means putting all of the condiments on one side of the burger with the pickles hanging slightly out. You sick mother... About 10 years ago when I was working at KFC, I had an older lady start yelling at me as soon as she began talking. She also mentioned something about not smashing the biscuits. So I smashed the biscuits. Oh, I did something like this. Mean people got the sides placed on top of their biscuits, and I always carefully picked out the nicer pieces of chicken and biscuits for people who took the effort to not be a C-word to me. Look upon your slightly flattened biscuit and rue the day that you scoffed at me and then told me to hurry the hell up. Dunkin' Donuts. Always some jerk holding up the line because their coffee is a shade lighter than they wanted. Oh, and they wanted 3 cups of mocha, not 4, and all in the middle of that 6 a.m. rush. When you do that, that's when you get decaf. Once I had a lady who made me go through 15 wafer cones until I found the one that wasn't destroyed according to Her Majesty. Wafer cones are fragile and are prone to tiny chips around the edges, by the way. When I finally found one that she approved of, I pressed the ice cream into it just hard enough to create a strategically placed hairline crack. That crack would get worse and worse the more she bit into it, ultimately rendering the cone useless. Advanced wafer cone warfare? Cone of duty. Modern wafer. I once accidentally served a customer a smoothie with a bolt in it. It came off of our ice making machine and it had a plastic part in it. The customer came back in and showed me some of the plastic. I dumped the smoothie out in the sink and saw a massive screw. He asked me if I found anything else. I lied to him and made him a new smoothie while feeling very thankful. Well, this technically doesn't fit the description, but I had to go through the pain of vividly imagining breaking my teeth on the metal or getting my throat and mouth stabbed. So do you, listeners. I don't know why imagining any sort of internal mouth injury gives me the shudders so much. When I worked at Burger King, there was this one middle-aged lady who'd come in once or twice a week and order a burger with extra onions, and no matter how many we put on, it was never enough. I'd put a sizable handful on, even though you're only supposed to put like 4 or 5 rings on it and then add a few more if they ask for extra, and it was just never enough for her. So one day she comes in and the store manager, surprisingly given the industry, she was actually pretty cool. She told me to put a lot on. So I put a huge handful on and my manager handed it to the customer while making sarcastic comments over the internal channel in our headsets. Sure enough, the lady came back and complained that it wasn't enough onions. Keep in mind, we already put, no joke, at least 20 times more onions in than we should have. So my manager, while swearing under her breath, handed me the burger and tells me to put some more onions on. Then before I got a chance to put any on, she was actually like, "No, forget this. Give me some of those gloves and I'll do it." She then proceeded to take almost half of the 2.5 kilo container of onions and dump it on the burger and rewrap it. The lady took it back to her seat while we all went out to the registers to watch. The look on her face when she opened that burger was priceless, and as far as I know, she never complained about not having enough onions after that. I worked at Wendy's for 2 years. I didn't necessarily punish the bad people, but I rewarded the good ones. For example, if it was a relatively slow day and a kind person came in who said things like please and thank you, I'd drop fresh fries for them so they were extra hot and crispy, even if they were relatively new fries. It's the little things that make life a lot better. I didn't ruin any food or drinks in this case, but when I worked at Starbucks, some guy was being a jerk, so I said, "Please don't be rude to me, sir," and it was the worst thing I've ever said to a customer. Probably the rudest I've ever been is when a customer chewed me out for something, it's been 6 or 7 years, I can't remember what it was, and then demanded to have my corporate's number so she could get me fired. I pointed to the sign on the counter, which included the number, looked her in the eye, and said, "I handed in my 2 weeks' notice 3 days ago. Do it." No, but once I was threatened with a punch to the face for getting a hair in someone's burger. Just so you know, it wasn't my hair. It might have come from his substance addict girlfriend that he was toting around who had blonde hair, like the hair he found on his burger. Pizza slinger here. I won't mess with your food, but I sure will shake the crap out of your 2 liters of soda in the car and smile as I hand it to you. One time at Burger King, I was working a particularly slow shift and this little kid came in with just enough money for a cookies and cream ice cream. These things usually take 30 seconds to make, but the kid looked really excited and since things were slow, I took an extra effort to make sure the Oreo cookies were nicely mixed into the ice cream and that the ice cream itself was full to the brim of the cup. Well, my manager didn't like that at all, not the part about taking the extra minute or so on the kid's ice cream, nor the part about actually filling the cup. So he made me throw it out. In spite of my boss, though, I just made a bigger and better ice cream for that kid. I added the whole shabam. M&Ms, Oreos, choc flakes, choc sauce, the whole deal. Filled it up so much that it was practically worth 3 times as much as the kid paid, and I told him to run for it. I don't work in fast food, but as someone who works in retail, let me tell you this. If you're rude to me, you're getting the ugliest change in the drawer. When I worked at Wendy's, we used the overcooked burgers for the chili. If they look like they've been on the grill for too long, we just throw them into a pan in a heated drawer. We usually stayed open till 1 a.m., and one time someone came past 1 a.m. I'd already cleaned the grill and had no burgers left on it. The manager took the orders because this witch complained and demanded we take the order. Fine, I'll use this overcooked, dry burger that's been sitting in a pan all day. Not exactly proud of it, but I did it. I used to work at a sandwich shop. Company policy was 3 baby tomatoes per sandwich. Once a lady made me angry and I only gave her 2. One guy was being a complete butthead to me in the drive-thru at McDonald's, so when he asked for extra pickles, I gave him no pickles. I still feel like a bad mother effer looking back on it. I worked at Subway and a lady came through drive-thru. My Subway has a drive-thru, yes, what the frick. She drove past the order microphone and honked and knocked on the window. Slightly irritated, I opened it and took her order. She got bacon on her sandwich and asked for me to be sure it was crispy. Okay, sure. I give the order to my coworker and tell the lady it would be done in a jiffy. She restates that she wants it crispy, and that the idiot working last night when she drove through was stupid enough to not know what crispy was. I soon realized that I was that idiot. I tell her, okay, I'll make sure it's crispy. Walked over, took the bacon myself, charred the greasy hell out of that frickin' bacon. It essentially just crumbled and looked like pepper. I don't like having my intelligence insulted by someone who won't see me making their food. When I worked at a Taco Bell or KFC, we'd accidentally make orders wrong so the customer wouldn't want it. Then we'd sneak it off to the side and eat it. I had a friend in college who delivered pizzas. He'd have us call in an order, then call back several minutes later after it had been made and cancel it. When his shift was over, he'd get to keep it and bring it to us. And people think that fast food industry workers aren't smart. I think the intelligent ones simply just don't stay very long. I never did anything myself, but I witnessed a female employee blow her nose on a burger after a customer called her the C word. And she had a cold too. Yep, we were real classy at that Carbondale Steak and Shake. Well, I just gagged, but that customer deserved something, so regardless of how revolting this was, I'm gonna let it pass. I don't care how dissatisfied you are. Slurs like this just aren't cool when you're leveling them against your teenage server. When I used to work at a baseball park as a fry cook, I remember this one time the biggest witch of a woman came in and ordered a cheeseburger. No problem. Keep in mind this is a small little league non-profit run-of-the-mill baseball park with a concession stand, so don't expect 5-star quality stuff. She orders said cheeseburger, and I grabbed it off the heating plate thing that we had to keep all the food we made hot. I'd cooked those burgers not even 5 minutes before she came in, so they were still pretty damn fresh. She then says, excuse me, I want a fresh burger, not the one that's been sitting there. I explained to her that I just recently put those burgers out, but she wasn't having it, so I said, screw it, and went ahead and made her a fresh one. So, when I gave it to her, this charming specimen proceeded to say, what? There isn't any lettuce or tomatoes or anything on this burger. Like I said before, rinky-dink baseball park. You don't expect 5-star quality here. I pointed out the fridge that held all the condiments and told her they're all right there and that you just put what you'd like on your burger. She then threw the biggest witch fit I've ever seen, screaming things like, I'm not the one who works here. It's not my job to make my own burger. You're the one who gets paid for this, not me. Now you either fix my burger or I'm getting your manager. Again, I complied because it was my first job ever, and I was only 14 at the time, so of course I didn't want to get in trouble. Finally, I put all of her stuff on her burger, still trying to be as polite as possible. I wrap it up and hand it to her. And again, she is not satisfied. She tells me she wants her burger cut in half for her. By this time, I'm completely fed up. I ask her the reason she needed it cut, hoping that this entire ordeal was for her child, which I gladly would have done, or at least some reason for me to feel obligated to grant her request. Her reason was simply, because that's how I like my burgers and I won't eat them any other way. By this time, I'm screaming inside my own head, then fricking starve, witch. But again, 14, didn't want to lose my job, so I complied. But, like people say, you never tee off the people who handle your food. So I took her burger to the back to cut it, and instead of getting a clean knife, I grabbed what we call our go-to tool, which was an old knife that we used to dig out dirt or caked up grease from the grill and deep fryer. Basically, every disgusting place you could think of, that knife had been there. Just for good measure, I scraped off some more gunk from anything I could find in my vicinity, and then cut her burger for her. I wiped the knife off on her burger, as if the burger itself were a cloth I was using to clean my knife. I came back, served her burger with a smile, and said, enjoy your meal. In short, the biggest witch ever came in asking for a burger that even a king or queen would find to be too much to ask for. I probably gave her some kind of stomach disease with a dirty knife that I used to cut the burger. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. It wasn't an actual customer, but I did do something gross once. I was working at Little Caesars Pizza. For a string of about 4 nights, we were getting a late-night, large order that the buyer just kept flaking on. If no one in the store wanted them, they'd ultimately be thrown away. Well, it just so happened that a car full of 4 or 5 college-aged kids would camp out back and asked if they could have what we were throwing out those same nights. After a few nights, it was obvious they were the ones making the calls. So I swept the floor and put all of the floor dirt and debris under the cheese. We gave it to them with the rest of the pizzas and never had a late-night order like that again. This one chick complained that her fresh fries weren't fresh enough, so when the next batch came, I avalanched them with salt. A guy in my town was once caught crapping in the beans at Taco Bell. As someone who spent a week in the hospital earlier this year with hemorrhagic E. coli contracted from a crappy restaurant, screw that crap. When I was a teenager, I worked at Burger King. This guy started verbally attacking me, saying his burger was cold. I apologized, assured him we'd make another, but he continued to be a right sausage about it. Fine, I assured him his next burger would be piping hot. I went and got a burger right off the grill and stuck it in the microwave for 2 minutes. I made the burger and carried it out to his table. I asked him to try it to make sure it was hot enough. I stood there sweetly smiling as he took a big bite and promptly burned his mouth. As he was frantically gulping down water, I asked him if it was hot enough. He nodded sullenly while still gulping down water. Still smiling, I said, "I'm so glad, sir," and nodded as if I was proud of a job well done. I turned on my heel, walking away, and felt like a queen for the rest of my shift. I licked the grilled cheese and pickles that my co-worker's ex-girlfriend ordered. She stole some of his military money and used it to buy substances. I'm well aware that what I did was disgusting, but that witch had it coming if you ask me. I never sabotaged, but if someone was rude, they were getting the lettuce that was wilted, or the tomato with the big splotch on it, or a salad that was just on the edge of expiring. If they were nice, they got fresh curly fries, mozzarella sticks, what have you. Also, we used to screw the corporation by holding the freezer door open, which blocked the office's window, while we ate by the fryer, or dropping extra moz sticks and jalapeno bites so we could eat them in secret. Also, if they ever bring them back, Arby's cheesecake bites are 1,000,000 times better frozen than fried. Tell your friends. Not on purpose, but the summer after my senior year of high school, I worked at a really busy pizza shop. It was not a chain, but a company with only 2 restaurants in the Minneapolis area, where everything was handmade. To the point of pouring flour, water, yeast, and salt into a big bowl and mixing it with an industrial bakery mixer for the crust. Tomatoes were pureed and seasoning was mixed in. Mushrooms were mixed with garlic and butter and baked. Cheese was sliced from a big brick with a meat slicer, one of those electric circular spinning blade things, but manual, the saw the back and forth kind of deals. Anyway, it was blazing hot that summer in 1988, and the kitchen was not air-conditioned. I had a drip of sweat run off my nose and into a pizza a couple of times. We were so busy that I couldn't take the time to do anything about it, so I just kept making the pizza. Hopefully my germies got baked to death in the oven. Well, while it's very sweet that you're feeling guilty about this after all these years, let me assure you that anyone who's ever eaten at more than a few restaurants in their lives statistically has to have consumed a tiny amount of baked sweat and breath vapor in their food. People are making your food, things happen sometimes, literally don't sweat the small stuff. I've worked at Pizza Hut for 7 months and I've not seen any of my co-workers do anything to the food. Although I've seen many customers claiming that their food has hair in it or has been improperly made to try and get it for free. Okay guys, I think I've won this one. Tim Allen would frequently stop in at the coffee shop I worked at in Colorado. When he came in, he always had a good 6 to 10 people in tow and would always order these super high-maintenance orders for drinks. Like 2.5 shots, 30% foam, 165 degrees Fahrenheit, just stupid crap. And worst of all, after doing this, he'd never tip. Never. I'm talking not even the leftover change. And to all of you saying, "Why should you expect a tip? You make coffee." Frick you, I get paid peanuts. Anyway, I decided to move back home and was leaving this place of employment in a few days. In walks the toolman himself with his 8 friends and family, and they order their drinks. Upon completing his beverage and handing it out, he took a sip and made a stupid little lemon face and said it was too hot. So I make him another drink and he complains that it wasn't stirred enough. So I remake the drink, and he looks at me again and says, "I can taste the decaf, you know," with a smug little look on his face. I think to myself, I'll give you something you can taste. I took the lid for his drink under my apron and proceeded to paint every part of the lid with my hairy family jewels, inside and out. I handed it out along with a free drink coupon, and that's it. He frickin' loved that drink. In short, I teabagged Tim the Toolman Taylor with a tasty, testy treat. I cannot confirm if he went, "Eh?" when he drank it. No, but I've worked in real restaurants where buttholes would sabotage the food because they were angry with the owner. They'd screw up orders to waste food and cost money, F stuff up when the health inspectors came, soap the soup to make people sick, and just flat out steal food and booze. I used to work at a pizza joint, and there were plenty of times I wanted to sneeze on the pizza when a customer was a butthole to me or the person on the phone, but I could just never bring myself to do it. I'm Canadian though, so I might not count. Some cop asked for a liter of cola and was being a jerk about it, so I stabbed a hole in the side and covered it with a promotional peel-away sticker. Man, that guy was mad. When I was in high school, I had a very quiet and shy friend. I'd frequently decide to fight her battles for her. She dated a guy who ended up cheating on her. Shortly after, he came through the drive-thru of a local fast food joint I was working at. He ordered some fancy blended coffee drink thing, and I mixed a bunch of dirty mop bucket water into his drink before serving it to him. Screw that guy. Other than that, I've never messed with a customer's meal or service, no matter how much of a butt they were. While working at the same fast food place, a middle-aged couple came through in their old beater truck. They ordered something like a small fries, small drink, and one burger. When they rolled up to the window, the smell of strong Mary J came pouring out of their car and into the drive-thru window. I figured they had to be hungrier than what they ordered, so I gave them an extra couple of large fries, large soda, and a large milkshake. I couldn't get away with giving them free burgers. As a thanks, they offered me a hit, so I hung out the window into their truck and took a puff or two. It felt good, man.
I forgot the pickles. On purpose.
Chef for 11 years now. Never have I or a colleague done anything to foul anyone's meal. If I saw that happen, I'd throw out the offending dish, banish the chef, and call the cops. We're professionals. We act professional. Well, I can see that the internet has its own blind justice when it comes to vengeance, and their idea of a mean person is very black and white. I don't want to sound like a crusader, but I worked as a Starbucks barista in the Jewel drive-thru cafe once. Anytime I had a difficult person, I'd try 10 times as hard to please them, because who am I to judge someone's bad day? I want people to know that even though they're angry, my encounter with them can maybe liven up their day. I have a few stories where I went that extra mile and increased my team's tip revenue because of it. Good people, we are the only ones that can control our actions. And vengeance, in my humble opinion, is a defense mechanism that helps nobody. At the same time, when a customer enters into a business transaction with another human being, they've got no right to be a total C-word regardless of how their day's been. I've had many days where I'm in a crap mood, but that crap doesn't mean I can take it out on the teen at the frickin' drive-thru just so they can hopefully play psychiatrist and help my day. I used to work at Subway. One lady came in and started yelling at me while my boss was trying to tell me something relatively important. It was already pretty busy, and this lady had waltzed to the front of the queue and demanded I make her a sandwich. I asked her to wait a few seconds while I finished talking and listening to my boss, who was already mid-conversation. The lady said something like, "This isn't good enough," and left $5 on the bench and told me to make her whatever sandwich and she'd be back in 5 minutes. I made her a veggie patty with lettuce, a frickload of jalapenos, and red wine vinaigrette, which any sandwich artist in the world will tell you is the most foul sauce ever known to man. One of my coworkers sniffed that sauce and just blew chunks one day. She came back 20 minutes later, picked up her sandwich and change, and probably didn't enjoy the rest of her day. When I was a teenager, I threw a chicken patty on a fillet of fish when we were busy, and the fish was still cooking. The customer did nothing to make me angry, and I feel bad for it today. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.